All right, everybody got themselves together? We muted? That means I'm here. All right. We're good? Are we ready now? All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to our board meeting this afternoon. To access translation, please click on the globe icon below, or at Dejan, you can go to the corner of the room to get translation. We are heading into our closed session for tonight. Before we do, we are here to listen to any public comment there might be about our closed session items. The public gets 2 minutes for public comment per speaker. The closed session items that we'll be discussing are conference with legal counsel regarding existing litigation, conference with labor negotiators, public employee appointment, and public employee appointment. Do we have any public comment?
We have no public comment.
Great. We will reconvene for open session at 6:30 tonight. Thank you, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to our board meeting tonight. To access translation, please click on the globe icon below, or at Dejan, you can go to the corner of the room to get translation. We are returning from closed session. After our opening procedures, the public will have the opportunity to make public comment. Unfortunately, President Gonzalez-Hoy and his family are sick and he will not be here tonight. Therefore, he asked me as the clerk of the board to chair tonight's board meeting. President Gonzalez-Hoy, we wish you and your family a quick recovery. The board at the last meeting voted to change public comment format. We have opportunities on agendized items in person through Zoom app and by telephone at the beginning of the meeting. Public comment will now last 1 hour. The time allotted for each speaker is 2 minutes. If you are attending the meeting in person, you will need to submit a request to address the board form to indicate your desire to speak on an agendized item. After it's been turned in to staff, they are placed in the order of when they are turned in. We also call on speakers one at a time and switching between public comment at Dejan and on Zoom. If participating via Zoom, you need to raise your hand by clicking on the appropriate icon in the Zoom app, or by pressing *9 if accessing the meeting by phone. No yielding of time or substitution of speakers is permitted. The public will also have the opportunity to make public comment on agenda items after the staff presentation for each discussion and action item. The public will have 10 minutes per item and 1 minute per speaker. Due to the Brown Act, board members cannot discuss items that are not on the agenda and do not usually respond to items presented in public comment. Now let's move to our opening procedures. First, we have the Pledge of Allegiance. Everyone, if you're willing and able, please rise. Dr. Hurst, please lead us through the pledge.
Yes, ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Now we'll move to the land acknowledgement. Do we have a student doing that, or are you doing that?
I will do that. I will be doing that, Mr. President.
Thank you.
We recognize that we are presently on the lands of the Chochenyo, Muwekma, Karkin, Ohlone peoples, and acknowledge them as the first inhabitants of the land we currently occupy.
Thank you so very much. All right, so this is my first time doing this, so we're gonna take a big old deep breath and we're gonna go nice and slow because I am a little nervous Nelly. So we're gonna do it real slow together. So let's go to the next part, and the next part is roll call. Dr. Hurst, will you please call roll?
Yes, ma'am. We know that President Gonzalez-Hoy is absent. Trustee Clerk Smith-Folds.
Good evening, everyone. Present.
Trustee Reckler.
Good evening, everyone. Present.
Trustee Phillips is not here at the moment. Trustee Christian.
Yes, good evening, everyone present.
Trustee Barron. Trustee Barron did contact me and she is out ill today. She's absent. And Trustee Santos.
Good evening, present.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Now we are moving to I'm sorry, Dr. Hurst, is there anything that we need to report out from closed session?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. Now we're moving to public comment. Those of you who are in the room, if you would like to turn in your public comment card, those of you who are on Zoom, if you want to go ahead and pop your hand up on Zoom so we can begin public comment. Again, public comment is going to last for 1 hour. We're going to go back and forth between in the room and on Zoom. Do we have any public comment in the room?
Yes, we do. Our first public comment is Mark Schultz.
One second. Hold on 1 second. Try it again.
About that. Okay, thank you. Hey, good evening. Prior to the March 1st board meeting, I asked the superintendent if he would disclose that the week prior, the state of California Supreme Court ruled that the school district vaccination mandates were illegal. He did not, and trustee Reckler was left with an unanswered question that evening. Here's how the superintendent may have responded. San Diego University School District was sued over its mandate. The Superior Court judge ruled that school district vaccination mandates are unlawful. The appeals court and the California Supreme Court, quote, affirmed in full, unquote, the Superior Court ruling. Therefore, trustee Reckler, all 3 WCC USD mandates have been unlawful from the beginning. Once the superintendent learned this truth, he should have made it clear to the entire community that the mandates had been unlawful. Instead, the district hid it behind a convenient end of the state of emergency narrative and chose silence instead of transparency. You were wrong about the legality of the school district mandates, and parents were right. In a recent communication, WCC USD stated to parents, "You are the experts." If you really believe that, why did you consistently refuse to listen to us when we explained the unlawful nature of the mandates? Consider these false vaccine statements by the experts. Only 2 shots and 95% effective. The mRNA stays at the injection site. The mRNA remains at most 2 to 3 days in the body. If you get the shot, you won't get sick. If you get the shot, you cannot transmit the virus. All demonstrably false. Teenagers and younger are now experiencing cardiac arrest post-vaccination. Worldwide excess deaths are up and correlate with the percentage of a population that was vaccinated. And you still recommend vaccination despite this and other evidence showing they cause youth more harm than having COVID. If you cannot openly admit the illegality of your mandates, why would you expect the heads of government and its agencies to admit the safe and effective label is actually wrong? It's foolish to think they would be any more virtuous. To demonstrate the veracity of previous district claims of transparency, I ask that you write to the entire district community that the
Thank you very much. And do we have public comment on Zoom?
Yes, our next public comment is Linda Minner. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Linda Minor. Excuse me. I'm an adult.
Please unmute yourself.
Yes, I am unmuted. Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
Okay, if that person can unmute, they can come back and we'll try again. Do we have any more public comment in the room?
Yes, our last public comment is Salon Harrison.
Hold on 1 second, Ms. Harrison. We got to turn that mic back on.
Now, okay. Good evening, board. Thank you for supporting our children, showing up. I just would like to, I come here a lot. I'm here still for the Black kids, but this time I'm going to talk about some things that I appreciate you guys putting effort towards. I'd like to thank Board Trustee Othery and Dr. Hurst for supporting, and Jamila that came to a few of our meetings, but she's a trooper at all the meetings. But thank you guys for supporting the BSU, the Black Student Union students, and doing the youth summit. I know I heard it was over budgeted. However, we're not done. We're going to be doing more with our youth, and thank you guys for just really acknowledging them, for us not just coming here and everything where we've been concerned about has just been falling on deaf ears. Definitely, there's a lot more that needs to be done as far as safety and academics for our youth. But thank you for setting that platform for the work to get started and making some attempt for it to get done. And also, I would like to recognize the special ed for doing well on the CSERF. I'm butchering the name, but the schools where we were over identified, where they're doing the prevention. I did hear from Black parents that they are utilizing the services and that they are starting to make impact. So thank you guys for recognizing, some of the things that you guys have done wrong and making right. So that's all. I'm complete. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Minor, it's, people are saying that they could hear her on Zoom. We just couldn't hear her. So do we want to do it again? So let's try calling on Ms. Minor again.
Miss Linda Minor, please unmute yourself.
I am unmuted. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, great. I am speaking about the adult school principal, Dr. Paul Mansing, who has refused to allow me to teach online, saying that all classes are in person now. And I submitted a letter from my doctor, Kaiser doctor, saying I'm in a vulnerable population. I'm 79 years old. She cited the guidelines of the health department, et cetera. That I should be teaching online. Mr. Mansing said that all classes, 100% classes are going to be online this spring term. However, I just looked on the list and ESL citizenship is online. Wait a minute, what did I just say? Just talking about speaking. He said that all classes are going to be in person. But I just checked the list. Citizenship, GED, test prep, intro to Indian cooking, 3 classes, QuickBooks software. So there are online classes. I have no idea why he wants to prevent me from being online, in spite of my doctor's letter to him. So I am expressing no confidence in Principal Paul Mansing at the adult school. And you also have a letter otherwise submitted to you. That's all I have to say. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Do we have any more public comment in person or on Zoom?
That is all public comment.
Thank you very much. Board, community, thank you so much for the public comment. Board, we're going to move to agenda review and adoption. Board, tonight, we're doing 3 questions per board member and a 1.5 minute comments, except for item E1 on the student data, where we'll do 4 questions and 2-minute comments. It always can be extended if you have more questions. Just please let me know. If there are no objections, the agenda can be adopted. Do we have any objections to the agenda? No objections? Great, the agenda is now adopted. We are now moving to B8, approval of minutes. We are looking at February 15th, March 1st, and March 15th. Does anyone have anything that they need to discuss when it comes to minutes? No, can I get a motion?
I'll go ahead and move the minutes of February 15, March 1, March 15 of 2023 approved as presented.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
I second.
Thank you. Board to the vote. Student trustee,
Santos, yes.
yes. Trustee Christian,
Christian, yes.
thank you. Trustee Reckler
Reckler, yes.
and Smith Folds, yes. The approval of the minutes passed, all yes. We are now moving to B9, the Budget Ambassadors Graduation. Dr. McIntyre, this is your item.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. It's an honor to be here with you this evening. I'm going to go ahead and project a presentation in celebration of the group of budget ambassadors that we're here to honor tonight for successfully completing the program.
Dr. McIntyre, I'm so sorry I have to interrupt you because a hand popped up. So, and we're still within our hour, so I want to make sure that we get this comment in. Hold on one second, Fran, okay? Just 1 second. Can we get the public comment from Zoom, please?
Ms. Kate Butler, please unmute yourself. Please unmute yourself.
Okay, so if Ms. Butler, if you're trying to talk and we can't hear you, please let us know, indicate that you're trying to do it. If anyone can hear her on Zoom, just shoot me a text and let me know. They don't hear anyone. I just got a text. They don't hear anyone. Okay, so Ms. Butler, we'll come back to you if we still have time within our hour, okay? Dr. McIntyre, please continue. Sorry for the interruption.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Again, it's an honor to be here with you tonight to celebrate the Budget Ambassadors graduation program tonight. Hopefully online, we're seeing the actual slides for this event. And so just I'll lay down a little foundation about the program and how we came to be. This program is actually a board direction program. And the intent of the program was to it started because the board recognized a need for the public to better understand district finances and was looking for ways to empower the public so that the way engagement would be seen as more transparent by a body who truly knows and understands what they're looking at and what we're presenting, because there's a lot of complexity both on the education side of what we do and on the finance side of what we do. And so with the objective of increasing community involvement and engagement in our finances through an educational program from district leaders, it was our approach. And so the district sent out an invite and we brought it here to a board meeting before, and we advertised on the district website and a few other places with the help of the communications team. And so we invited various stakeholder groups who have input into our day-to-day. That included parents, staff, community members, and even district partners. And this program was free. It was hosted by the team in business services. And I do have to make sure we have a slide at the end, but I just don't want it to get lost in the shuffle. I especially want to thank Kyra Brown, Mackenzie Martin, Veronica Vega, and Rosie Chamorro for all their work with the materials and translation and coordination. This was a pretty big lift because it was the first in a series of classes. And so getting that first set of classes set up is much harder than carrying on with something that we have. And so I want to make sure that we appreciate them. This class was broken down into over 8 weeks, and participants learned all about the budget process. They learned about the importance of the school board and district finances. They learned about financial principles and school site allocations. So how the sites actually get their allocations, how those calculations are done. We had hosted weekly live sessions that were also recorded. So though any student who couldn't come to the live class could still watch the video. And if either the live class or the video were not enough, there was also assigned homework and hosted office hours twice a week. So we had office hours both during daytime and after hours to accommodate student learning. So that way everybody had the ability to engage at the level that was beneficial to them. We had 46 people sign up for the program, and here on the left-hand side, you see the demographic breakdown, and on the right-hand side, you see the geographic breakdown of the participants. Now 46 people was a great starting class, and we didn't have as many people make it through as we had hoped. We had 13 out of these 46 make it through. And so what part of my team is doing over this next week is surveying the people who chose not to finish the class through completion to see what, what we can do differently to have a higher completion rate moving forward if the board would like to offer this again. Another thing that we also wanted to share some of the content that we went through, what the schedule looked like. So, the early part of the presentation was really laying the foundation for the class and showing some broad topics. Then we covered how legislation, the history of school finance legislation built into our current model. We talked about the board's responsibilities around the school budget process, and we built a vocabulary of concepts around school finance principles. By week 3, we were diving headlong into the governor's January budget proposal. So we were taking some of those concepts we learned in the first 2 weeks to see how the state was weighing into what we do in education. And that actually went on for a week and a half and fed into the budget process in week 5. By week 6, we were looking at we were reviewing the district's audit, and we were reviewing district spending allocation compared to a set of peer districts. So comparative expenditure data. So that way the team can understand what choices we're making compared to similar size school districts geographically around us. And then finally, we looked at the actual individual allocations for each funding resource for each school site, how they're developed, what the criteria are. And then we brought in our lead negotiator to talk through how the bargaining takes place within the district. And that was meant from a real apolitical approach, very factual. Here's what the process looks like. And so the discussions, both during office hours and classes, were very vigorous. Some people had some good things to say, but that feels a little self-serving. So I'm going to continue on. And I want to make sure that we talk about 2 things. One, very proud of the 13 graduates we have tonight. And I also wanted to share that this entire 8-week program was accomplished at a cost of $700 true cost. We spent $678 in overtime cost for translation and $22 for materials. And we had over 190 hours of volunteer time after regular work hours by salaried staff to accomplish the actual work of the class. And so while it wasn't a large amount of direct dollars, it was a big commitment by the district and by the board to support this program. And I really thank you for the opportunity for our team to try to bring this forward. And so with that, I was hoping I could ask Dr. Hurst to come down, and we're going to call up the 8 of the 13 graduates we have here with us tonight. And it was my hope that once all the graduates have received their diplomas, that we could take a group picture with all of the board, if that was okay.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. McIntyre.
And so with that, I would like to start by calling Miss Kathy Belanti. Are you here with us tonight? Our next graduate is Elizabeth Bonshu Mooney. Woo. Next, we have Charlotte Gilbert. Okay. Moving on, we have Amanda Hund. Next graduate we have is Rochelle Milford. Nice. That's awesome. That's fun. Next, we have trustee Leslie Reckler. Okay. Next, we have Amarita Smith. And last but certainly not least, present tonight with us, we have Board Clerk Jamila Smith Folds. No coordination there. So while the inaugural cohort of the Budget Ambassador Program gets together for their picture, hopefully with the rest of the board, I would also like to share that we had 5 other graduates who were not able to meet us in person tonight. We had Carmel Aguilar, Andrea Arnold, Ronnie Arnold, Marianne LaFosse, and Annabelle Lim, who also graduated for the program, and we will be getting their diplomas to them shortly. Thank you all. We're very proud.
Thank you so much, Dr. McIntyre. Thank you to all the graduates. It was a eventful time. It was a nice 8 weeks and we learned a lot. Board, do you have anything that you want to say to the graduates or to Dr. McIntyre and his team? Trustee Reckler, go ahead.
Thank you. So I want to congratulate all the graduates and all of those who came. There are certainly a number of people. This is not a complete list, but I'm thinking of Ted and Helen and Gilberto and David and Nissa who showed up a lot. And for whatever reason, they didn't finish, but they were certainly there for majority of the meetings and hopefully came away with a lot of knowledge. So to the graduates, this was a labor of love. It was at least, 16 to 21 hours of class time. We never ended on time. It was definitely the most information rich and dense class I could have ever imagined. It was absolutely of unbelievable quality. And in addition to the classwork, there was also homework and commenting on each other's thoughts. So it was really an exceptional learning experience. So you got, it was the gold star of budget finance. So I want to thank Dr. McIntyre for following up and actually doing this. It was great. I mean, this was a real class that you would probably get in business school. And I want to thank all of the people who worked with him, Rosie, Veronica, Lori Roberts, Kaya, McKinsey. The background work and the way the class flowed was just unbelievable. It was truly amazing. I've thought for a long time that it's important to have people on the ground that understand school district finance. It is unique, and unique is the nice way to put it. It is crazy, the way schools are funded in California. So to have people out in the community that understand how this works and what districts are up against, I think is extremely important and helps all of us. You know, the big takeaways is that California is not a well-funded state, and our funding relies almost entirely on what state and federal gives us. So I'm hoping that for those who participated in any, you know, those who completed and those who didn't, to send in the feedback so that we can look at it and tinker, and hopefully we can do it again. So thank you, everybody. It was really terrific. Thanks again.
Thank you so much. Does anyone else have anything that they would like to say? Any other board member? Dr. Hersey, do you have anything that you would like to say?
I was just listening to Dr. McIntyre and just sharing the commitment from the staff to this budget ambassadors process. And I just wanted to just take note of that and just say a personal thank you to him, but not just to him, to his amazing staff and the extraordinary amount of time that they put in. Thank you very much, sir. And I also want to just take the opportunity to congratulate the graduates. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any graduate have anything to say out there? You want to say anything? I don't see any hands up. Anybody? Oh, there's somebody on the card? Great. Okay, go ahead and call the card.
Mr. Mike Raccoon Kinney.
Oh, is that for this one or for the next one? That may be for the next one, friend.
Sorry.
That's all right. Listen, this is easy breezy. We doing it real nice and slow. That's all right, Rosa. That's okay. We all good. Genesis, you good? Rosa, you good? We all good. Anybody want to say anything about the budget ambassador graduation? Going once, twice, 3 times a charm? Nope. All right, moving on. Now we are on B10. We have a request to address the board, Pinole Valley High School speech and debate students. Pinole Valley High School speech, yay. Pinole Valley High School speech and debate students are led by Ms. Lamus and will present a proclamation to the board. Let's see if we can get that mic on. Hold on 1 second. Can you try again, Ms. Lamus? Not yet. He's coming right behind you.
Thank you. Good evening, board. First, I would like to acknowledge our American Sign Language interpreter in our continued effort to ensure our deaf and hard of hearing community have equal access to communication. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Michelle Lamons-Rayford. I am the proud coach of Pinole Valley High School's Forensic Speech and Debate team. Today is about our effort to shake, break, and reimagine systemic issues that continually overlook much needed change when it comes to both acknowledging and celebrating the beautiful history of people of color. Today is about honoring our Indigenous ancestors. In that spirit, I call the name of my great-grandmother, Julia Middleton, my ancestors in the Cherokee Nation, and all of our past and present Native elders from all Indigenous tribes. Today is about empowering and amplifying student voices while demonstrating the limitless potential students have to impact change.
My name is Elizabeth Duarte. I'm a senior and a 4th year forensic speech and debate student. It's vital that we acknowledge the land that we stand on, as well as the rich and diverse culture that California sits on. California sits on stolen Indigenous land, and it's important to recognize and honor the heritage of the Indigenous people who once and still do live here. We take the time to acknowledge the land on which we are gathered. We pay homage and offer respect and gratitude for the citizens of the tribal nations and their enduring relationship with the land. Native American settlement on West Contra Costa shoreline began at least 5,000 years ago. The Pinole region is the territory of the Hutchian and Ohlone people. We remember the struggles and tragedies of the people who first called this land home, while never forgetting to acknowledge that the institutions and campuses of the West Contra Costa Unified School District occupy traditional territories of Indigenous lands. With honor to our past and present Native citizens who are the first true inhabitants of the land we call America, I propose to acknowledge Indigenous Peoples' Day as a district-wide holiday to recognize, acknowledge, and celebrate the lives of Indigenous people. Thank you. Next slide.
My name is Harper Isles. I'm a sophomore at Pinole Valley High School, and this is my first year in speech and debate.
Harper, hold on one second, please. We need to share the presentation if we could. So sorry, Harper. Please
okay.
forgive me.
And this is my first year in speech and debate.
Hold on one second, Ms. Harper.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can get the slide presentation up for everyone in the room to see and on Zoom. So sorry, just give us 1 second. And Harper, I believe we're on slide 2. Can you make sure?
3.
Slide 3.
Yes, thank you. Here is a table of data that shows us statistics on the different ethnicities we have in Pinole. And based on this data, there are 84 listed Native Americans in our district. Next slide. At least 5 districts in the Bay Area have an Indigenous Peoples' Day event marked on their calendars, from SFUSD with 114 schools to Sequoia Union High School District with only 6 schools. West Contra Costa has 54 schools. So what makes our community less deserving of an Indigenous Peoples' Day? Especially when one similarity that all school districts in the Bay Area have is being on Indigenous land. Next slide.
My name is Alyssa Keller, a junior and third-year speech and debate student. As Indigenous Peoples' Day, the second Monday of October is nationally recognized as a federal holiday. I propose that Indigenous Peoples' Day be recognized on our academic calendar and be given off to all members of WCCUSD, as to give time to celebrate the beautiful and diverse cultures that America is built upon. The California Department of Education has recognized Indigenous Peoples' Day as a school holiday. We, as a diverse district, should work towards cultural awareness, inclusion, and acceptance, as the California Department of Education has, in order to create an inclusive district for not only students, but also teachers, administration, staff, and parents. Next slide.
My name is Gibson Meeker. I'm a senior, and this is my 3rd year in speech and debate. It is important for the WCC USD district to include Indigenous Peoples' Day on our academic calendar because it shows our support for underrepresented communities. Some may argue that we already have Indigenous Peoples' Day off every year as a smoke day. Therefore, we don't need it on the calendar. However, a day off is simply not enough. We must officially name the holiday and add it to the academic calendar to show that we truly acknowledge and appreciate all cultures in our community.
My name is Sheila McKinney, and this is my 4th year in speech and debate. We propose Indigenous Peoples' Day be added to the academic calendar because it's important that we are culturally inclusive to everyone. We want a district that reflects all of its people. If WCCUSD puts this into perspective, culture accessibility allows people to perceive the world from other cultures' perspectives. People may successfully traverse a more multicultural future by developing empathy, adaptability, and the ability to work with others from many cultures. It creates allies who fight for the liberation of everyone, regardless of differences. This is what we hope to develop in our community of learners who inevitably take these values out into the world.
My name is Ashley Chinuba. I'm a junior and first-year speech and debate member. The importance of recognizing Indigenous Peoples Day cannot be understated. It is the act of embracing and acknowledging a culture that for so long has been disregarded and destroyed. We as people living in this country should make the conscious choice to celebrate this land and its original inhabitants. While Indigenous cultures and all cultures should be celebrated all 365 days of the year, the least we could do as a district is acknowledge Indigenous Peoples Day on our academic calendar to prevent the potential erasure of such cultures. This is an opportunity that should be taken to highlight and uplift the voices of those that have been overlooked for so long. And can you go back one slide?
Next slide, please. My name is Sophia Lopez. I'm a sophomore and a first-year speech and debate member. I propose that our students be able to say that our district appreciates the true heritage of America by adding Indigenous Peoples Day on our calendar. The president has already with the official almanac, California's governor has, and the District of San Francisco has consistently celebrated it as well. Furthermore, missing Indigenous people now have an alert of their own because law enforcement in California recognize that this small minority group is being targeted and needs to be protected. This is called the Feather Alert, and it brings active participation from Native American communities to help find them. Our nation and district needs to uplift and cherish Native American culture, including members of my own family who are descendants of the Inca tribe. Our presumably progressive district should feel a sense of urgency to dedicate that second Monday of October to our original founders. Next slide.
My name is Rennie Snook. I'm a senior, and this is my first year in speech and debate. Indigenous Peoples Day is significant enough to be brought to the academic calendar because it honors Indigenous people from our past and present. It is important because it brings rich Indigenous culture to light, and it allows us to celebrate their heritage. It is essential that our district acknowledges and respects the impact of the first inhabitants of this land. The following map data indicates states and counties in the US that have already begun making changes to the calendar, with some outright replacing Columbus Day in favor of Indigenous Peoples Day. Next slide, please. The following map is of the states that allow state workers to have off on the second Monday of October. Next slide, please.
My name is Nathaniel Atia, and I'm a senior and a second-year speech and debate member. At the moment, there exists a gray area in our calendar, sometimes a smoke day, sometimes a staff day, a district holiday in all but name. We here in Contra Costa County have a tradition of celebrating the rich diversity of our community, which carries an obligation to observe such richness in our calendar. Observing Indigenous Peoples Day would be a way for the district to put this gray area to good use by honoring the people who inhabited this country for thousands of years. It would therefore be in the best interest of the school district to establish Indigenous Peoples Day as a district-wide holiday. And board, honestly, the question we should be asking is, why not? I would now like to welcome Mike Raccoon Eyes Kinney, member of the Cherokee Nation, who will now present us with the proclamation.
I would like to say that in the 550 years of what we call the United States, 125 million Native people have been killed either due to ethnic cleansing or racial genocide. As a matter of fact, the United States government, under whom we call the Indian killer, President Andrew Jackson, introduced the gateways of America's history of racial and ethnic cleansing and genocide. I would like now to share with this esteemed body the actual resolution that I am hoping we can vote upon tonight. Whereas the West Contra Costa Unified School District acknowledges Indigenous people are the true Native Americans. They are the first inhabitants and caretakers of this land we now call America. Whereas the West Contra Costa Unified School District recognizes and honors the land that is currently home to so many past and current district-owned properties as historically Aboriginal territories and indigenous lands. That would be the Huchon Band of the Ohlone. Whereas West Contra Costa Unified School District asks you to join the Honorable President of the United States, Joe Biden, and the Governor, Gavin Newsom, by acknowledging, honoring, celebrating the perseverance and rich diversity of Indigenous people, as well as the contributions of immeasurable positive impact that Indigenous peoples have made to every aspect of American society. Whereas the West Contra Costa Unified School District also joins the Governor of America in solidarity and support of the Native and Indigenous-led movements towards balance, reciprocity, and respect. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the West Contra Costa Unified School District recognizes the second Monday of October as Indigenous Peoples Day. Let me repeat that again. Acknowledges and honors the second Monday as Indigenous Peoples Day and commend its observation to all members of the West Contra Costa Unified School District.
Thank you very much for blessing us with your presence tonight. We're humbled and honored by your support. We are hereby asking the Board of the West Contra Costa Unified School District to bring forth a motion and vote on this proclamation tonight. Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you so very much, Pinole Valley Speech and Debate. Thank you so much for all of everyone who attended tonight. Board, can I have a motion to accept the proclamation that was just presented before us? Trustee Phillips?
So moved.
Thank you. May I have a second? Thank you, Trustee Christian. So we have a motion by Trustee Phillips, a second by Trustee Christian. Board, do we have any comments? Trustee Phillips, go ahead.
Thank you. I want to thank all the students and other people who spoke about this evening. This is a very important issue, and Indigenous Peoples Day should be recognized. I do want to remind people that the board actually has already passed a resolution observing this day. The issue, in my opinion, is that it is not celebrated the way that it should be. But the proclamation that we're voting on tonight is actually a restatement of something we've done already, and that happened a few years ago. I do want to also talk very briefly about it being a holiday, which I support. But the conversation that I had with the last superintendent, when we passed this resolution, he said, well, that doesn't mean we're going to take the day off. I mean, that's almost a quote. One of the issues that we have is that our calendar is actually negotiated. The board does not unilaterally decide what days staff gets off and does not. So, but I do think, and I do hope with conversation with our labor partners, that this is, and that it becomes a day that's actually recognized to be taken off. But I just want to make sure that everybody understands that the board has voted to do this already, but that the board does not unilaterally decide the calendar. That is something that's done in collaboration with our labor partners. But I do support this being recognized and being celebrated. And I do think that it should be a day off. So those are my comments. And again, I want to thank everyone who came here on this evening and spoke.
So thank you, trustee Phillips. Anyone else before I make a clarifying statement? No? So what I heard that Pinole Valley Speech and Debate want to have is that on our academic calendar, that it doesn't say Smoke Day, it doesn't say Columbus Day, that it says Indigenous People Day. That's part one. If I'm incorrect, please stop me and correct me. That's part one. The second part that Pinole Valley Speech and Debate want to know is that it is a day off for WCC USD. We already have students have it off, but they're looking to have it off to observe, respect, and acknowledge all district members. Am I correct? Yes. Okay. Thank you. President, I keep saying president. Okay. So trustee Phillips, is that clear? Are you keeping your motion?
I was moving the proclamation
Yes.
so I was moving the proclamation.
Okay. Perfect.
Not necessarily what anyone said at the speaker, because we cannot unilaterally change the calendar.
Okay, so you're moving the proclamation as it stands? Yes? Okay.
Yes.
And trustee Christian, you are keeping your second as it stands? Great. Let's take it to a vote. Trustee Phillips?
I'm sorry, can I have a point of order, please?
Yes, you may.
So we
What's your
have-
point of order?
So we have a resolution 2223-71, which is what's in our board packet. And then there's a proposal. What specifically are we moving? Are we moving the resolution?
The resolution that was just presented to us by Pinole Valley Speech and Debate. Inside the resolution that was just read by our elder. That's the resolution. And if you look at the therefore be it resolved clause, that's what we're voting on.
Is it the same as our resolution or is it different?
The resolution that's being presented today has a very clear distinction from the resolutions that we typically adopt at the board level. This resolution is calling for the district to change the name on the academic calendar to be Indigenous Peoples' Day. This resolution is different from some of the resolutions that we have come before us that say this month is Indigenous People Month, or this month is Black History Month, or this month is Women's History Month, and we want the sites to observe and do curriculum that reflects that.
So once again, is the proclamation that was read different than the resolution that's in the board packet?
In the board packet now,
Yeah,
it should be the same thing.
it should be the same thing.
Let's pull it up. Give us 1 second. Dr. Hurst, is the resolution that we had that was just read to us the same resolution in the board packet? Yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
It is the same.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Okay. Trustee Phillips, you have something else?
Can we just repeat the therefore clause?
The therefore be it resolved clause?
Yeah, so we're all on the same page.
Dr. Hurst, could you read the therefore be it resolved clause?
Yes, it says now therefore be it resolved that the WCC USD hereby and henceforth recognizes the second Monday of October as Indigenous Peoples' Day and commend its observance to all members of the WCC USD community.
So just to clarify, that is what we did before, but that said, the language that Dr. Hurst just read, that is the language that I'm moving.
Thank you. And that's the language that you're seconding, correct? Trustee Christian? Yes. Okay, so that's what we're taking a vote on. All right, we are ready. Trustee?
Santos, yes.
Thank you. Trustee Phillips?
Yes.
Trustee Reckler?
Reckler, yes.
Trustee Christian?
Christian, yes.
Trustee Smith Folds, a yes. It passes unanimously. Congratulations. Job well done. Board, if you would mind, if we could come down and take a picture, Pinole Valley, if you wouldn't mind stepping up and taking a picture, we want to memorialize this. Great job. Okay, everyone, we are moving on to B11, resolution number 2223-66. Ms. Sanders, I believe this is yours.
Thank you very much. One moment. We're starting with 6-7. Okay. Whereas poetry as an essential part of the arts and humanities affects every aspect of life in America today, including education, the economy, and community pride and development. And whereas poetry has produced some of the nation's leading creative artists and has inspired other artists in fields such as music, theater, film, dance, and the visual arts. Now therefore be it resolved that the West Contra Costa Unified School District Board of Education and WCCUSD Superintendent proclaim April 1st through April 30th as National Poetry Month. Be it further resolved that the West Contra Costa Unified School District Board of Education encourages activities to recognize and celebrate the cultural riches our community has to offer and to recognize the important role poetry plays in creating and sustaining this great nation with appropriate ceremonies, activities, and programs.
Thank you, Ms. Sanders. You read resolution 2223-67, correct? National Poetry Month?
Correct, I did.
Okay, thank you. So can I get a motion?
I'll go ahead and move resolution 2223 dash
67.
Thank you. For poetry.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Board, any comments? No to the vote. Trustee,
Yes.
trustee Phillips,
Yes.
trustee Reckler,
Yes.
trustee Christian,
Christian, yes.
trustee Smith Folds, yes. Resolution passes. Ms. Sanders, can we go to resolution 2223-66, Public School Volunteer Week?
Yes.
Thank you.
Whereas volunteers enhance student potential and achievement, and whereas volunteers support our mission, vision, and goals by sharing their skills and experiences with our students and staff, and whereas throughout the school year, our volunteers serve as tutors, guest speakers, mentors, and classroom helpers. Now therefore be it resolved that the West Contra Costa Unified School District Board of Education and WCCUSD Superintendent recognize and commend volunteers and join the nation in celebrating National Public School Volunteer Week from April 17th through April 21st, 2023. Be it further resolved that the West Contra Costa Unified School District Board of Education and WCCUSD Superintendent encourage activities to recognize volunteers this week.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sanders. Board, do I have a motion to do I have a motion for resolution 2223-66, National Public School Volunteer Week?
Yes, I'll move the resolution 2223-66, National Public School Volunteer Week 2023.
Thank you. All second. Any discussion, any comments? Trustee Reckler, go ahead.
I want to thank everybody who volunteers in our schools. The amount of parents, community members, grandparents that come to our schools and work with our students and our teachers, administrators in unbelievable capacities is admirable. And there are a lot of people out there who never get any recognition and come in day after day and work with our students. And I deeply appreciate it. You do make a difference. Our volunteers really don't get a lot of praise or celebration or recognition, and it truly is from the heart. And I deeply appreciate everything you do for our district. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Trustee Phillips.
I want to take this moment also to just say thank you for the work that you all do as volunteers. The truth of the matter is that we need more adults on campus. And every time we have a loving, caring, kind and compassionate adult come on campus to work with our students, it makes our district and the services that we provide to our students that much better. And I don't even want to begin to imagine what it would look like without all of our volunteers. I honestly don't know that we can deliver the services that we need to in a safe environment. So, and that's no knock on staff. It's just the fact that more adults on campus working with children just makes for a better learning environment. So I want to thank everyone who takes their time to help our kids.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? I just want to say thank you to all the school volunteers. I was a volunteer for a very long time. I still volunteer every day doing traffic duty. So I want to thank all of those who take the time to volunteer at all of our school sites. It is a labor of love. Okay, let's go to the vote. Trustee Santos.
Santos, yes.
Thank you. Trustee Phillips.
Yes.
Trustee Reckler.
Reckler, yes.
Trustee Christian.
Christian, yes.
And trustee Smith Folds is a yes. Thank you very much. It passes. Now we're moving on to B13, Resolution 2223-68, National Student Leadership Week. Ms. Sanders, this is yours.
Thank you. Whereas student leaders have provided valuable services to their community, their schools, and the WCC USD school system. And whereas today's students have the potential to make the world a better place, now therefore be it resolved that the West Contra Costa Unified School District Board of Education does hereby adopt this resolution to designate the week of April 24th through 30th, 2023, National Student Leadership Week, and be it further resolved that the West Contra Costa Unified School District Board of Education recognizes and encourages our student leaders to continue to advocate for student voice and leadership in education throughout the WCC USD system.
Thank you so very much. Could I get a motion?
I'll move resolution 2223-68, National Student Leadership Week.
Thank you. I'll second that. Board, any comments? Trustee Reckler.
I want to thank all of our student leaders, and I want to encourage more of you to jump up into leadership. It is a great training ground, whether it's at school, whether it's on student council, whether it's up here on the school district board, whether there's opportunities in city government for student leadership. It's a great way to have your voice heard and to make a difference in the world. And I encourage you to raise your hand and self-nominate the next time an opportunity comes up.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Yes.
I also just wanted to take the time to kind of shout out the All Student Congress, another branch of student leadership within the district. They've been doing a really good job, especially in building a foundation for future student leaders to rise up. and take over what we're trying to build for them. So it's just a quick moment to shout out another form of student leadership in the district.
Thank you so very much. Anyone else? Thank you, student leaders. We really appreciate you. And this is yours. You are here for 13 years and it should be the best 13 years. So thank you for all that you do. We want to continue to hear your voice. Let's go to the vote. Trustee Santos.
Santos, yes.
Thank you. Trustee Phillips.
Yes.
Trustee Reckler.
Reckler, yes.
Trustee Christian.
Christian, yes.
And Trustee Smith Folds is a yes. It passes. Thank you very much. We're moving on to B14, Resolution 2223-69, Arab American Heritage Month. Ms. Sanders?
Thank you. Whereas the history of Arab Americans in the U.S. remains neglected or defaced by misconceptions, bigotry, and anti-Arab hate in the forms of crimes and speeches, and whereas civil rights abuses, harmful stereotyping, and bullying of Arab Americans must be combated through education and awareness, and whereas in 2019, Representative Debbie Dingell and Representative Rashida Tlaib issued a congressional resolution for National Arab American Heritage Month to be recognized on a national scale. And whereas Arab Americans join all Americans in the desire to see a united and diverse society where every individual is treated equally and feels safe. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the West Contra Costa Unified School District Board joins the Arab America Foundation in celebrating April as 2023 National Arab American Heritage Month in recognition of the many contributions that Arab Americans have made to our society.
Thank you so very much. Board, can I get a motion? Trustee Phillips?
I move the resolution.
Thank you. Miss Tammy's not here, but she will freak out if you don't say the rest of the thing. Resolution number, can you tell me that part, please?
2223-69.
Thank you very much. May I get a second?
A second.
Thank you, Trustee Christian. Any comments, board? No? Okay, to the vote. Trustee Santos?
Yes.
Thank you. Trustee Phillips?
Yes.
Trustee Reckler?
Reckler, yes.
Trustee Christian?
Christian, yes.
Thank you. Trustee Smith Folds is a yes. That passes unanimously. Thank you so much, Ms. Sanders, for all your hard work, and thank you for reading those resolutions. Board, we are now moving on to consent items. Are there any items in consent that are going to be pulled? This one out. Hold on. Are there any items in consent that are going to be pulled? If so, please tell me those items. Anyone?
Yes, ma'am. We have, the district is pulling the contracts on procurement summary as follows: Fagan, Freeman, and Full Frost. Also, the Lozano Smith for 30,000, and then the Lozano Smith for 200,000. And Orbach, Huff, and Henderson for 10,000.
Thank
We
you.
want to pull those until further discussion with the board president.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Trustee Reckler?
From contracts, I'd like to pull C6, urban intellectuals only, for a brief discussion on annual measurable outcomes.
Thank you. Trustee Phillips?
Just for clarification, did that capture all of the attorney contracts?
I believe it did, yes.
Okay,
Yes, it is, sir.
thank you.
Anyone else have anything they would like to pull? All right, so I only have C6 and I have the attorney contracts that Dr. Hurst mentioned. Everything else is up for consent. Can we have a motion? Do I motion consent? We motion consent? Yeah, can I have a motion for consent, except for C6 and what Dr. Hurst pulled?
I'll go ahead and move consent with the exception of C6, urban intellectuals, and the all the legal contracts that were pulled.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Christian. All right, board, to the vote. Trustee Santos?
Santos, yes.
Thank you. Trustee Phillips?
Yes.
Thank you. Trustee Reckler?
Reckler, yes.
Thank you. Trustee Christian?
Christian, yes.
Thank you. And Smith Folds is a yes. Thank you very much, board. We are moving on. Hold on a minute, board. We are now on action items. We are on D1, ratification of represented salary schedules and approval of unrepresented salary schedule for 2022-23 and 2023-24. Dr. McIntyre, I believe this is yours.
Is Mr. Tanaschek going to do this one?
I'm not sure, friend. Your name is Bod on my little list.
You want me to do it? Okay, great. I guess I do have this one tonight. Thank you for the honor of bringing this item forward. Very happy and excited to be asking that the board ratify the Me Too salary agreements for all units. And so let me very briefly describe what that means. Essentially, at the March 1st board meeting, the board approved the UTR agreement for both the 22-23 fiscal year as well as the 23-24 fiscal year. And at the last board meeting, the board provided direction to staff to bring forth Me Too for all of the units, including the unrepresented bargaining unit. And so tonight here you have the salary schedules for the non-represented bargaining unit that include this is non-represented management that includes a 6% salary increase for 22-23 retro back to July 1st of 2022 and a 6% salary increase for 23-24 for non-represented unit, as well as the SSA IBT 856 SSA IFPTE 21. So Teamsters, SSA, as well as the West Contra would all receive the Me Too for 23-24 at the 6%. So while we had other agreements with those units previously, we're now recognizing in this not only the unrepresented increase, but the increase to the Me Too units that include SSA, Teamsters, and WCCAA, but only WCCAA remains unresolved for the 23-24 year. That's the only open contract for next year because their settlement for the 22-23 year was only a 1-year settlement and did not include reopening of the whole contract. And so later on the agenda, I believe the next item we'll be asking basically to sunshine and reopen that contract. So by combining these all with all the affiliated adjustments, I wanted to make sure that you understood that the Me Too calculation for all of the units, including non-represented, was included in the AB 1200 disclosure and reviewed with the County Office of Education as part of the UTR item that was approved on March 1st. So there's nothing new. There's no new steps as a result of this. But by including all of these salary schedules, including for next year on this agenda item, it does keep us clean with stirs and purrs when it comes to salary service credit. And that's why we're including them all here as one collective item.
Thank you, Dr. McIntyre. Board, can I get first of all, is there public comment? Do we have any public comment after D1? Any comment on Zoom? Seeing no public comment, board, can I get a motion?
I'll go ahead and move D1, ratification of represented salary schedules and approval of unrepresented salary schedules for 22-23 and 23-24.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. Board, any comments? Trustee Reckler?
So I just want to say congratulations and thank you, and I'm sorry that this took so long. And then another comment I would like to make is to ensure that these schedules go up on the website, please. I actually look at them. Thank you.
Trustee Phillips?
Thank you very much. I am happy for folks who are about to get raises that they not only want, but need. At the same time, when the original underlying contract came up, which is the UTR contract, I actually abstained on that. And the reason that I abstained on it is because, and I've said this before, that the raise that was offered was over 2 times greater than the cost of living adjustment that we received, which I don't actually think is sustainable. So this vote on this evening, which is to do the same thing across the board, I'm going to be taking the same position. I don't begrudge anyone for advocating for themselves and for their members. I think that's what you're supposed to do. And I do congratulate you on being successful in that. I'm just going to abstain because I don't think we can afford it. So thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, trustee Phillips. Anyone else? No? To the vote. Trustee Santos.
Santos, yes.
Thank you. Trustee Phillips.
Abstain.
Thank you, trustee Reckler.
Reckler, yes.
Thank you, trustee Christian.
Christian, yes.
Thank you. Trustee Smith Folds is a yes. 3 yes, 1 abstention, 1 advisory yes. Thank you so very much. We are now moving on to D2. Accept public comment and approve receipt of initial bargaining proposals from West Contra Costa Administrative Association and West Contra Costa Unified School District. Mr. Conrad, this is the one where I get to use this gavel, correct?
Yes.
Great. All right, so this is a public hearing on the sunshine of the initial proposals for West Contra Costa Administrator Association and West Contra Costa Unified School District. Is this your script, friend, or am I reading this?
You are.
Great. Tonight, the district board will conduct a public hearing on the initial proposals of the West Contra Costa Administrators Association and the district pursuant to the sunshine requirements of California Government Code Section 3547. During the public hearing, the focus will be on the gathering of input from the public, including other employees and parents regarding the initial bargaining proposals being presented. The purpose of this meeting is to inform the public about the topics of negotiations between the district and the West Contra Costa Administrators Association. Tonight's meeting will proceed as follows. First, I will open up the public hearing. Public hearing is now open. Second, Mr. Conrad, Director of Labor Relations District Negotiator, will be given 10 minutes to make presentation to the board regarding the initial proposals from the West Contra Costa Administrators Association and the district. Mr. Conrad, you're up.
Thank you, Clerk. Superintendent, public, and trustees. Tonight, I'm here to request on behalf of WCCAA as well as WCCUSD the sunshining of the collective bargaining agreement. We have a 1-year current collective bargaining agreement extension between West Contra Costa Administrators Association and WCCUSD, which expires on June 30th, 2023. Pursuant to Educational Employment Relations Act, the initial proposals to be negotiated by the school district and labor union must be submitted at a public meeting by the governing board. The initial proposals of the West Contra Costa Unified School District to the West Contra Costa Administrators Association, along with the initial proposals from the West Contra Costa Administrators Association to the West Contra Costa Unified School District, at which time the public is allowed to make comment on the proposals. As stated previously, this is part of the sunshining process that must be completed prior to entering into contract negotiations. Once an agreement is reached with each unit, the agreement will be reviewed by the Contra Costa County Office of Education in requirements of the AB 1200 and then brought forth to the board for ratification. These proposals are for a successor agreement between the two parties for the current 1-year contract extension that expires on June 30th of 2023. Due to COVID-19 pandemic, there's been much discussion on the memos of MOUs as well entering into to address specific short-term concerns. These are not part of the actual sunshining between the parties. It's important to the public to understand the West Contra Costa Unified School District and the West Contra Costa Administrators Association are currently addressing conditions that are impacting both parties. These contract negotiations presented tonight are not connected in any way to any prior discussions as it relates to situations where an MOU was obtained. Accordingly, I'll be reading both the initial proposals for WCCAA as well as WCCUSD that are to be sunshined, to which to allow public comment and then a motion thereafter on behalf of the board. The financial impact will be determined at the completion of the negotiations, of which an AB 1200 again will be submitted to the county office. The recommendation is that both WCCUSD and West Contra Costa Administrators Association will post the initial proposals, which was done for public comment. And thereafter, after completion, requesting that the board vote on a motion to approve the presentation of the initial proposals for the district, as well as WCCAA, and adopt the initial proposals of the district in accordance with their own with section 3547C. The proposals for the West Contra Costa Unified School District that we're requesting to open up include Article 1, agreement, Article 2, recognition, Article 3, salary, Article 6, grievance procedure, Article 8, leaves, Article 11, filling of bargaining unit vacancies, Article 12, benefits, Article 14, harassment policy, Article 15, evaluations, Article 18, reclassification, Article 19, non-discrimination, and Article 23, end-of-year releases, reassignments. Note the district reserves the right to open other articles as needed during the negotiations and to make other proposals as needed throughout the negotiations, as well as amend, delete, or modify. The West Contra Costa Administrators Association have requested to open up Article 2.1, recognition, Article 3.1.3, salary, Article 12.4, cash in lieu, Article 21, safety, and Appendix A, salary schedules. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Upon the conclusion, we would like to now ask for public comment. Is there any public comment on this item? In-house?
We have no public comment.
Thank you. And there's no public comment on Zoom. Great. All right. So board, do you have any clarifying questions? No? Great. All right. So at this time, I will close it and then we'll move for what? Mr. Conrad, do I close it first and move for a motion first?
Close it first.
Great. Close. All right. Now, board, do I have a motion?
I'll go ahead and move item D2, accept public comment and approve receipt of initial bargaining proposals from West Contra Costa Administrators Association and West Contra Costa Unified School District.
Great. Do I have a second? Yes, sir.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion, board? No? Great. All right, we're going to go to the vote. Trustee Santos.
Santos, yes.
Great. Trustee Phillips.
Yes.
Great. Trustee Reckler.
Reckler, yes.
Great. Trustee Christian.
Christian, yes.
Great. Trustee Smith Folds is a yes. It passes. Absolutely wonderful. Okay, we are moving on to D3, Williams Lawsuit Complaints Quarterly Report. Mr. Freeze, this is you.
Yes, tonight we're asking the board to accept the Williams report for the third quarter for the months of January through March of 2023. There were no complaints received for textbooks, vacancies, or facilities conditions.
Thank you so much. Board, any questions? No, may I get a motion? Yes, Trustee Phillips.
I move that the board accepts the Williams lawsuit complaints quarterly report.
Thank you. May I get a second?
I second.
Thank you. Board, any discussion? No? Great. To the vote. Trustee Santos?
Santos, yes.
Thank you. Trustee Phillips?
Yes.
Thank you. Trustee Reckler?
Reckler, yes.
Thank you. Trustee Christian?
Christian, yes.
Thank you. Trustee Smith Folds abstains. It still passes. Okay. Thank you. We are moving on to the discussion items. Before we move on to the discussion item, board, we are doing wonderful with time. It is absolutely amazing, but this next one is going to be a little lengthy, so we're going to take a break. Okay, we're gonna take a 10-minute break. Anyone have a problem with 10 minutes? Nope. Anyone want 5 minutes? Great, we're going 10. All right, we're gonna take a 10-minute break. Staff, could you put up the little timer saying that we will be back at, was it 8:05? 8:05. Thank you very much. Thank you, community. We'll be back at 8:05. 10-minute break. Let's move on to board. Shh, shh, shh. We're focusing. Let's bring it on back together. Bring it on back. Bring it on back. All right. Now, thank you. I appreciate y'all. Thank you very much. We are now on E1 Student Data Summit number 2. This is Ms. Huffman. I believe this is yours.
Yes,
Thank you
ma'am.
very much.
Good evening, Clerk Smith-Folds, trustees, and Superintendent Hurst. I'm excited to come before you this evening to share our Student Data Summit number 2. I'm joined by our Chief Technology Officer, Tracy Logan, Director Morgan Matthews, Director Elizabeth Henry, Director Dr. Gabriel Chilcott, Director Isao Orozco, and Director LaShante Smith. In this presentation this evening, we will be presenting to the board and community our mid-year student data and practices that have been utilized to support and empower all of our learners and educators, as well as provide an EduClimber update. With that, I will turn it over to Tracy Logan. Thank you.
Good evening, board and community. Next slide, please. So as Ms. Martin Huffman mentioned, we are here this evening. This is our second of 3 annual board data summits. In each of our sessions, we are presenting on the same topics. And the purpose is to really give us an overall sense of how our students are doing. So this evening, we will speak about academics, social emotional learning, culture, climate, the student experience, and specifically, what are we doing as a system when we look at the data? How are we responding, and what are we doing about that data? This evening, if you go to the next slide, we wanted to first talk a little bit about where we are with our EduClimber pilot. As you know, we have a very new team in research and reporting led by Director Matthews and one other staff member, and they are doing lots and lots of manual work to pull data from various systems. We've been on a journey as a district to find a tool that will help us pull that data, student data from various systems, and allow us to see it in one place so that we can see a full picture of individual students and students across our system. I'm excited to tell you this evening that we are in the middle of our EduClimber pilot with various schools that you can see there on the screen and are getting very good feedback. And I'll turn it over to Director Matthews, who can share more about that pilot and our next steps. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you, Ms. Logan. I'm very excited about the EduClimber pilot, and we mentioned it tonight just to peel back the curtain a little bit on all of the charts and figures that you're about to see. As Tracy mentioned, they're currently created manually, and the pilot is an amazing opportunity for users throughout our system to be empowered to get access directly themselves to our data. So everyone from teachers, school leaders, school staff, central office staff, and even some features to share our charts publicly would be available. And so far, we're hearing excellent feedback from the 13 schools and central office members participating in the pilot. It will continue through this month, and we'll be bringing a recommendation to the board in May or June. Next slide. Great, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here this evening to help support the board in understanding our student data and digging into it. So our goal with this ongoing series of data presentations is to make our data transparent and available to all of you, and to build our collective muscles to understand our student data in the context of our educational programs with our ed services partners. So as Ms. Logan mentioned, we will be getting a broad overview of our data today. So I just want to remind you, we won't be making any particular decisions based on the data, and we're not giving an update based on any particular goals. The purpose is to slow down when we're not under pressure to make those decisions to build our overall understanding of the data. And as always, we will welcome the opportunity to gather any questions for follow-up. With that, I'll pass it back to Ms. Huffman.
Thank you. Next slide. So this evening, our session flow will be an academic update on English language arts and also math. We'll present some student data and then also high leverage practices that Educational Services has been implementing to move student achievement. We'll also be providing a culture and climate update on student data, chronic absenteeism and suspensions, and then also high leverage practices that have been supporting to move student achievement as well. Thank you. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Director Elizabeth Henry. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. We will start with some early literacy data. And this slide captures our ESGI assessment. This assessment is for our TK students. We currently have 19 TK classes throughout the district. Our ESGI actually assesses 6 areas in both literacy and math, but here we're looking at data in 2 areas, upper and lowercase letter recognition. So we can see how our TK students are progressing in these 2 areas from fall to winter, and we can see approximately a 30% increase in the number of students that are meeting benchmark. Next slide, please. Here we're showing our STAR early literacy data. The STAR early literacy assessment is a universal screener for our K-1 students to progress monitor their early literacy skills. It is a computer adaptive assessment, which means the test is designed to adjust the level of difficulty based on the responses provided by students. And we are assessing students in the domains of word knowledge and skills, comprehension strategies, and constructed meaning. So we can see here our K-1 students progressing from fall to winter. We can see a 3% increase in kindergarten and an 8% increase in first grade in the number of students meeting that benchmark. Next slide. Moving on to our iReady assessment. We have data for our K-2 students from the schools who are using the iReady assessment. This assessment is also used to recognize growth, to progress monitor towards goals, and to identify areas for improvement when planning instruction. We have 13 schools across the district who are currently utilizing this assessment. And this data gives us a grade level placement for students, which is based on a student scale score to show the percentage of students on or above grade level at a fall benchmark and also at a mid-year benchmark. So we can see change in the percentage of students here scoring on or above grade level. And here we're seeing about 20% or more increase. And the next slide, I will pass to Dr. Gabriel Chilcott.
Thank you very much. Okay, let me get to where I'm supposed to be. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the other benchmark data and academic data that we have. So first, I'm going to begin by reminding that we are piloting iReady in 14 schools this year, and therefore we have 2 different sets of data that I'm going to speak to. We choose as a district, our policy is to have both a proficiency metric and a growth metric for both of those assessments, just so we're able to look at what a student is able to do right now and what they're achieving right now versus the growth over time. And although those metrics are relatively similar, they're not really comparative across the 2 assessments. And so that's why I'm going to speak to 2 different sets of data this evening. So first, The state benchmark, which is the one that we're looking at here for STAR, is the reason why we chose this one is because it is predictive of what students are going to score on benchmark. So on this one, you can see that over time, 22% of students scored proficient on the Mass State benchmark in fall and 23% in winter. And there's similar metrics for ELA. I mean, different numbers, but like the growth is relatively static, meaning that they're only 1% off of each other. But because this is predictive of SBAC, that means that we are having the same number of students predicted to score proficient on SBAC now as we did in the fall. If we're looking to make a 5% gain overall as a district in proficiency scores on SBAC, that does indicate that we are not on track to be able to do that. But it is a decent indication that students are learning because we still have the similar proficiency metrics. Next slide, please. So the next one we break down by different subgroups, different groups of learners. And so if you look at this, what this indicates for us is there's some areas of focus. We continue to have discrepancies between different ethnic groups and different subgroups of learners within our system. And although this is relatively high level data, meaning it's just raw percentages across the district, it does give us spaces to dig in deeper to more specific data sets to really look at why we're continuing to have unequal outcomes for our students and how our practices, we can really build on those to focus our resources to helping our students most in need. Next one, please. So this is the growth. And again, this tracks the same way as the proficiency ones where we start with race and ethnicity. The SGP, or the student growth percentile, the district goal is 65%. And if you look at the percentage that we have 61 and 62% SGP. And these are relatively good metrics showing that we have steady growth across the district. And although the growth is good because they're all above 50% for all of our subgroups by race and ethnicity, there's still discrepancies between different ethnic groups. And so that's something that we always want to make sure that we are looking at. And when I speak a little bit later around one of our math initiatives, I'll talk about how, for instance, we are pulling our resources towards the schools that have higher African-American numbers of African-American students within our district. And so we use this data in order to direct our resources to improve practices in those schools. And then the next one, again, will be the other subgroups. Next slide, please. Thank you. And again, the numbers are good mostly across the board, meaning that they're above 50% and they're closing in on 65% overall. But especially in this one, you can definitely see some discrepancies, especially on the mass student growth percentile between foster youth and district-wide. That's a pretty large gap, and so it's something that we need to continue to address. Next slide. Oh, you got there. Thank you. So this is iReady. And so one question that came up, thank you, Trustee Reckler. We got a little preview of one of the questions that you put in there, and it was an interesting one. So again, we can't compare the two assessments because they're built differently, and they're just not, that's not a statistically valid comparison. But on the other hand, pointing out that the predictive measurements that come out of iReady versus the predictive measurements of STAR are actually on either side of our actual SBAC scores from the previous year is an interesting thing to bring up. And it's something we're looking forward to landing on one assessment system because it allows us to be able to narrate that a little bit better and speak to what the discrepancies between the actual SBAC scores are versus the predictive SBAC scores. And I look forward to addressing this question again in the spring once we get the actual SBAC scores and we're able to track it a little bit more, from now until then. So again, interesting question on that one. So again, on this one, we see some growth over time between fall and winter for math. Frankly, I'm not sure what to ascribe that to. That jump in growth for math is something that we need to dig further into to see if it is aligned with some of the practices at those schools that are implementing iReady or not. So that is what this high-level data review is for. Like, it gives us spaces to be able to dig in to more specific data sets to align them with student experience and to practices that educators are engaging in at those sites. So Next one, please. Now, this is again by subgroup. And again, you'll see the growth in math district-wide and relatively static for reading. And again, this highlights the same thing that I said when we're talking about STAR, is those discrepancies between subgroups is really how we target our resources, where we're sending, for instance, our math coaches, and the work that we're doing to improve instruction across the district. And then next is the iReady growth by race and ethnicity. So this, again, to refocus back to, we always focus on a proficiency and a growth metric. And you can see that's 56% growth in math and 66% in reading. So the growth in reading is faster at the iReady schools than it is in math. But again, the math overall has jumped further than the reading overall. And so again, those kind of discrepancies that we catch in the data are places that we want to dig in deeper to really get a sense of what practices might be leading to those differentials and outcomes. And we can go to the next, and actually we can go to the next one after that as well. And now we're going to talk about the high leverage practices, really what we're doing, how we're pivoting from looking at this data to the work that we're doing in curriculum and instruction. So I will now pass it off to Director Liz Henry.
Thank you. So as an ed services department, we have aligned on practices to build a cohesive system of support across our schools to increase student achievement and to support adult learning. We recognize the need to build capacity at our sites in order to sustain this work. Across our departments, we have focused on providing professional learning for our teachers through a series of PD offerings aligned to the organizational goals in our instructional focus plan. Our teams also provide additional trainings as needed at individual sites. In addition, we're building systems to support and develop our school site instructional coaches and teacher leaders with the goal of growing capacity at sites to facilitate professional learning. We've also focused on developing instructional knowledge of our site leaders through content sessions during our principal learning, as well as through site learning walks. During those site learning walks, we're able to support school teams in a series of classroom observations, providing feedback, identifying school-wide trends, and supporting identified next steps. And finally, we are all working with a set of focal schools determined through data who receive additional support based on need. Next slide. So these some highlights from the literacy department. As we support student growth and adult learning, we've offered 21 central PD sessions for teachers so far this year. We've had a total of 386 teachers actually attend professional learning so far, with an average of 20 participants per session. Many of these sessions have focused on early literacy to align with the organizational goals. And in particular, we've partnered with the Center for the Collaborative Classroom to provide trainings on SIPs, systematic instruction in phonological awareness, phonics, and sight words. And we have purchased this program for every school site to support systematic instruction in phonics. So we've had teachers from 34 of our school sites attend these SIPs trainings, which is very exciting. And we are seeing an increase in implementation of the program at sites where leaders and teachers have attended the trainings. Next slide, please. This year, the literacy department has also partnered with OASA, the Office of African American Student Achievement, to provide tiered literacy support at 7 schools: Bayview, Coronado, Lincoln, King, Nystrom, Perry's, and Steege. Academic support providers have been hired part-time, 15 hours per week, and this is funded through OASA. They're receiving ongoing training in SIPs to provide push-in and small group support for our African-American students grades K through 6th grade. We're actually still working on hiring an academic support provider at Steege. I do want to say that, however, we are currently serving approximately 150 students through this initiative. The first academic support provider began in January and others were added in February and March. And so we're monitoring the progress of every student, but we will be able to report on a more robust data at the end of the trimester. We're also providing support to school teams at these school sites through learning walks, data analysis support, observation and feedback. And I will pass it back to Dr. Gabriel.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about just a couple of really cool things that are happening in the STEM department. First of all, well, I guess I'll give that back to you. That's okay. I'm sure I can do it from memory without my notes, because this is, like I said, some really interesting work. Oh, and notes are, that's great, even better. Okay, so Zern is a high quality math curriculum that's to be used outside of core mathematics instruction. Because it is a high quality curriculum, we actually could use it as our first instruction, but it's not our adopted curriculum. But we bought it this year for every elementary school. And the reasoning behind that was, and I think if you've been around for a while, you know, the West Contra Costa has not had a cohesive math intervention across the board at all of our schools. And this was a way for us to address that. And it was aligned to both our adopted curriculum relatively well, and also some other curricula that are being used across the district that are not our adopted curricula. And so all elementary schools and K-8s have access to Zern, and this is where we are focusing our math coaching on a couple of targeted schools, or a few targeted schools as our highest areas of need. So one thing to say that this is supported by a Cal Foundation grant. So I do want to say thank you to the Cal Foundation for helping us bring this work to them. So nearly 50% of all grades 1 through 5 students are logging on weekly. And for something that's an opt-in and in its first year, this is a really high percentage. So that's looking good. And as well, the higher level data that I showed you earlier, or spoke to earlier, we also have some drill downs on the schools that are using Zern versus the schools that aren't, and implementing more to fidelity. And so we do have breakdowns that go deeper into how our practices are landing across the schools. And that's not necessarily appropriate for this high level, more meta view of the data that we're looking at, but this just in speaking to Zern Elementary math support and what's happening. And with this, we align our professional development, our focal schools, and our learning walks to these areas of need in order to fully implement Zern. Next slide, please. Another interesting one is the Amplify Science simulations and the Promethean active panels. So this is a joint initiative with the IT department and curriculum and instruction. So Johnny Milwaukee, our math coordinator, and Laurie Roberts are working together to bring the Promethean panels into classrooms and to use our newly adopted science curriculum in an active way. And so up there, you can see students actively going up to the board and engaging in, let me just look at what this was, the plate motion unit, where they use their understandings of plate motion and tsunamis to design a warning system, then use simulation to test effectiveness of their designs and still come in under budget. And if you just think about that one sentence and how many different standards and content areas that crosses, that's the power of collaborating with IT, bringing in there and pushing this through. And so this was another area that we've been focusing on on the STEM side of curriculum and instruction. And I will pass it off to SOO.
Thank you, Dr. Chilcott.
Thank you.
Good evening, board, community, cabinet members, fellow colleagues. Dr. Chilcott. Reclassification. Reclassification is one of the major highlights for an English learner in our district. Reclassification is when a student meets state and local criteria, otherwise known as reclassification criteria, and then is deemed RFEP, or reclassified as fluent English proficient. This occurs throughout the year, and we celebrate it at the end of the year. In fact, it's coming up, the reclassification ceremony on May 2nd. The criteria contains, as I mentioned, state, which is the LPAC being the English Learner Proficiency Assessments of California, and local criteria, some which were mentioned today, for example, the STAR. Students' grades teacher recommendations, and parent consultation. On this slide, you can see the increase and decrease of the reclassification rate at West Contra Costa Unified Schools District for public schools. These percentages do not include charter or private. And for that reason, they currently do not match DataQuest, the California database for English learners, which do include charter schools. You will see that our goal for this year was to increase the number of English learners being reclassified from last year to additionally 100 more reclassified students. We received that projection through our database of Elevation, which is our in-house EL data platform. I'm happy to announce that the data on this slide has been updated as of last week, and we have met our reclassification goal of 629 with additionally 100 and counting. We actually surpassed that goal for this year. Next slide, please. Some of the aspects in terms of planning for reclassification, once again, that overall highlighting goal and beyond, is through PD. There's been 3 major areas of PD through our EL achievement team. The first being the English Learner Toolkit. This toolkit is standards-based, K-12, and currently we're working with the co-author Lynn Friedman to enhance our leadership team within these toolkits. This year, we focused on academic conversations. I want to remind folks that academic conversations lies on that sea of literacy, of reading and writing, but it also connects to our data. I mentioned the LPAC. Our students in our district, the highest need in the LPAC for English learners is listening, to be able to build on one's conversation. In fact, 6,423 of our students are of high needs in terms of that aspect of the listening domain. So this was our high leverage strategy because our students' biggest strength is speaking, which means that we can build on that skill. You will hear some of our next steps to where we're going with that as well. The next item in terms of PD is elevation, which I also mentioned prior, our database, but it is not only a database. This is year 2, and we have included strategies. And when I mean strategies, it's not a one-stop shop. They're modules and they're focus-based by student. This means that a teacher with a partner or a school site or a COP, community of practice, can do a module for newcomers, long-term English learners, even literacy. Through these modules, we can record their growth and gather their reflection data for particular students in their class. And lastly, this year was also a big curriculum year. We noticed that the Williams case was able to get zeros across the board for completion. And one of the big reasons was because this year we have Benchmark All, the ELD curriculum adopted for our district for ELD in elementary schools. So those are our big items for PD across the district. Our district numbers will be our next slide. So we've partnered with schools, and we also have focus schools. These focus schools are based on EL population or percentage at the school campus. At the same time, we've also partnered with schools by making partnerships with schools. We have district level data that everyone's invited to, and we also have site level PDs in the last frame as well, for both district and site-based. District-wide, we have over 400 participants, and remember that includes the academic conversations, elevation, and our adopted curriculum. Currently, Elevation is our highest attended PD. We've also partnered with schools, for example, Richmond High School, Kennedy, Helms, Dejan, to mention several secondary schools. And for elementary, Grant, Chavez, Downer, Lincoln, Verde, Dover, as well as other schools such as Bayview, Perry's, and Washington. Furthermore, we have an English learner COP for teacher leaders. Currently, there are 28 teacher leaders in that COP who have enhanced their skills in all 3 modules for Elevation and for academic conversations. Next slide. Aligned with our team, we also have an instructional focus plan with monthly PDs, teacher COPs, specific site support. This year, we have a total attendees of 1,057 attendees, averaging 25 per session, with our largest session being 88 people per session. Lastly, we want to talk about next steps for PD. As mentioned, we've completed Elevation modules, looked at the English Learner Toolkit, focusing on academic conversations, but we want to build from there. There's no one single strategy that solves this increase in terms of reclassification. We need to know, teachers, us, ourselves, administrators at the site level, how to use several strategies to focus on growth. That's why we are currently working on building out our PD for English learners and within that toolkit around word, sentence, and text level strategies, combination scaffold systems, so we can meet the student at where they're at and take them to where they need to go. Also, it aligns with other department goals and district literacy goals as well. Thank you. That is my time. I'd like to pass it to my colleague.
Ms. Huffman, would it be okay to stop and do the academic part before we move on to the climate part? Because it's 2 distinct parts, correct? Okay. So board, let's stop and take academic questions first, if you have them, and then we'll move on and we'll do school, climate, and culture questions. This is a big presentation. This is what the board work is about, which is student achievement and student academics. So we can start with 4 questions and then we'll go back around if you have more. Does anybody have questions? Trustee Reckler, go ahead, do 4 and then we'll come back to you, okay?
Okay, thank you. Thank you all very much for the presentation. I'd like to come back to iReady and STAR, and on a very basic level, beginner 101 assessment, might you be able to explain what the differences are between those 2 assessments and what you're measuring and what the differences are?
Sure. So the 2 assessments, as I mentioned, are built differently. So the STAR Renaissance assessment is norm referenced, which means although the questions themselves are criterion referenced, what they do is they take the answers of a large set of students across the country, and they use those scores to determine what proficiency is. And so that's how they determine proficiency. The iReady assessment is criterion reference, which means that each individual standard, they determine mastery for that standard. So when you're taking the assessment, that's what proficiency is mastery of the standards up until that point. And that's why they're pretty much, well, it's just not statistically valid to be able to compare them, is because they're very different. Now, it's not that one is better or one worse. They're just different in terms of what they measure. I guess I'll pause there just to see if there's more clarifying questions from that.
So when you say standards, do you mean Common Core state standards?
I do.
Okay. And then STAR is, I mean, for lack of a better comparison, is STAR like a big nationwide curve? It's taking all data from
You
anyone?
could, yeah, I mean, I get where you're coming from, and yes, you could say that in the way that they determine it, because they are taking the large group of students to be able to determine proficiency, but it's still standards based. So you can drill down to the domains and the standards in STAR as well, because each of the questions is aligned to a standard. It's just that the way that they determine proficiency is through a comparison of students nationwide. So for instance, when the SGP is determined, which is the growth percentile, they're comparing a similar student at a similar school, or actually a large group of similar students at similar schools across the nation to determine what typical growth is. And so when I say 65% growth is what our goal is, that's 65% of students at typical or high growth is what we're aiming for, because then most of our students are growing at an accelerated rate over what the norm would be, as determined by comparison to the nationwide pool of students.
Okay. How do you, or how does Ed Services define proficient?
Fun question. Okay. Proficiency is the ability to prove mastery on whatever you're looking at right there. So if we're talking about throughout a year, so going back to my days as a teacher, I would develop an assessment that determined their proficiency on what I had just taught, like that lesson, that unit, whatever it was going to be. So when I define proficiency, it's the ability of the student to show mastery on the specific subset of content standards that we're looking at that moment.
Okay, and this is really specific to literacy, really just for literacy, with the same answer.
I guess I would give the same answer. I don't know if you want to give a more nuanced one for literacy. Yeah, I'm not sure that I would change the way my.
Would change, but I do think all of these assessments have different cut points or benchmarks that may determine proficiency. And so you have to keep that in mind when we're looking at individual assessments as well.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to professional development. So there were 386 teachers that participated. Do we know if that's higher, lower than previous years? And do we know how many teachers the total pool might have been to receive this particular group of PD?
What was the second part of the question? I'm sorry, I had trouble hearing it.
The total pool of teachers, like, is 386 out of how many total
Sure.
would these professional development sessions apply to?
Yeah, so all teachers are invited to the sessions, however, they are optional. I cannot speak historically to how many teachers have attended professional development, and maybe Dr. Chilcott can add to that. Just being new to the district, I don't have those statistics. Or Ms. Huffman.
I was going to say, I don't believe that professional development, there's no data of the collection of the number of attendees from previous professional development. Because that's one of our practices, we recently started tracking just the number of attendees so that we can sort of see who is actually receiving professional development across the system.
Okay, and then finally for this round, can you determine with any kind of statistically significant correlation, or really seeing whether SIPs is impacting literacy or foundational skills, phonics, phenomes?
I believe at the end of this trimester, we'll be able to have a little bit more specific data, as a lot of the school sites begin training and really starting with implementation in January. And so the data that we're currently looking at, it is from the end of February. I think it's a little bit too fresh to be able to make those correlations. I do look forward to sharing more specific disaggregated data and correlating that as much as I can to some of these initiatives and to our professional learning, specifically probably next month or at the end of the school year. Please.
I'd also just like to add on that our academic support providers are participating in our EduClimber pilot, and we'll be tracking which students they work with in order to better answer questions like this in the future.
Thank you
Okay.
so.
Okay,
so-
great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, trustee Reckler. I have a couple of questions for this round. Trustee Reckler, will you do me a favor and tell me how many more questions you have so we can see if we have another round to go? And anybody else have any questions before I go? Trustee
I might
Phillips?
just have some general around reclassification.
Okay. Trustee Phillips, you have any questions? Okay. Trustee Christian? Okay. I do have a couple of questions. Mr. Chilcott, you hit on one, student growth percentile, that's SGP. We know that schools are an alphabet soup, so there are a lot of acronyms in there. I'm gonna ask you two more if you could tell me what they are. ESGI,
Yeah, you want to talk about that one?
ESGI just stands for Educational Software for Guiding Instruction.
thank you, and COP.
Communities of Practice.
Thank you so much. That's the first question. The second question I have, do adult ed teachers get PD offerings?
Yes, we don't drive those out of curriculum and instruction. We tend to be focused, but I do know that I work with them and so sometimes we build those out together. So yes.
Thank you. Third question, the ZERN program, does every school get the book and the program on the computer? There's a book that goes with ZERN too, a big thick white book for fourth graders. I know that because my kid carries it. Does every school get the book and the computer program or just the computer program?
No, so it's not just the computer program, but it's not the book because it's not our adopted curriculum.
Okay.
But they do get, there's these printable materials that they have for the units that they're focusing on. So if it were our adopted curriculum, then we would have the book that would sort of go through the different areas of content. But because it's not, we pick and choose what gets rolled out, and not just us centrally, but the schools themselves.
So some schools get the book, some schools may not get the book.
Well, it's sort of like unit by unit. So they don't get the book, they get,
The
basically
little
packets.
packet.
Yeah, more or
Okay.
less, but they track with the book.
Thank you so very much.
Mhm.
And then SIPs. You said, I heard someone say that all schools have SIPs. Is that accurate?
Correct. All kits were purchased, and Ms. Huffman can speak to this because I believe this was last year. Kits were purchased and sent to all school sites.
Okay. And I do have a follow-up on that one, but
Yes.
my 4 is already done, friends. So I'm gonna have to come back to my round. Trustee Reckler, go ahead.
Okay, so since we brought up ESGI, I'd just like to ask, is it a statewide assessment? Does the district have choices on what they chose? And if so, what were the reasons for choosing this particular tool?
Sure. So again, this choice was last year, and it came out of a committee of TK teachers and administrators. So they recommended this assessment. There are other early literacy assessments. This is an assessment that is aligned to the standards. And it does have many subsets of tests that you can select. And so the TK committee selected the 6 subset tests that are currently utilized. And those were aligned to the report card that they also developed.
Adding on to that, a huge improvement this year using the ESGI assessment is that it's very easy for us to keep track of our TK data district-wide. Previously, we used a homegrown assessment that was kept track in a number of Google spreadsheets. And so this allows us to accurately and frequently report on our data.
Okay, and then if I could, sorry, if I could just ask one other thing on SIPs. So when you say all schools, do you mean all 56 schools, like high schools too? Or are we're talking K-8, I think?
You want to speak to the purchase last year?
The purchase was just for our elementary schools. So if you're a K-8, K-6, K-5, you have a SIPS kit. You have SIPS kits at your school site, and schools that did not or were missing materials or didn't have everything that they needed, there was an additional purchase this year that Director Henry and her team got out to school sites.
Yeah, we are actually still having school sites reaching out for additional materials, which we're able to provide to them as they're growing their program throughout the school site.
Okay, great, thank you. So I think the number is 34 because it's all the elementaries and K-8s. And then on reclassification, if I could ask the process, so it just occurred to me, I don't know if I ever knew this, that kids reclassify all year round. I thought there was like one test at the end of April, and then we have this party in May. So might you just expand on that a little bit?
Sure. I think the idea that it happens once a year is based on that ceremony. In fact, we were the first district, I believe, in California to have a district reclassification ceremony. See, that tradition might have caused that. And remember, the state assessment is only given once a year. Now, the other assessments, if students meet that proficiency on the state assessment, we have all year to meet other criteria. So students' grade can go from F to an A throughout the year if they meet that above C- or above criteria, for example. Anytime during the school year, then they're eligible to be reclassified if that's the last criteria, for example. Other local criteria is in the same scope. STAR, for example, occurs throughout the year. Maybe at the beginning of the year, they didn't meet that benchmark, but in December or oftentimes right before our ceremony, folks meet that criteria and now they're eligible for reclassification. Once folks are eligible, there's teacher recommendations, parent recommendations, consultations. The consultations for parents actually happens before reclassification because it's an ongoing conversation that occurs when you become an English learner. Hopefully that clarified a little bit of the process.
Okay, and it's the LPAC, correct?
Correct.
Right.
The LPAC is the state assessment, English learner proficiency assessments of California.
Okay, all right, yeah, thank you.
Trustee Reckler, you finished? Okay. I have a couple of more questions, a couple are clarifying. I heard that we have, is it 13 schools using iReady or 14 schools using iReady? I heard two different numbers.
Yeah, I said 14, but it is 13.
13. Okay, thank you. 13 schools are using iReady. And then when we did the TK or when we did the TK test for 19 classes, how many kids?
I actually don't have that information on the top of my head, but I can follow up with that.
I would appreciate that. Thank
Yeah,
you so much. I'm
problem.
doing kind of raw numbers in my head. If we have like 22 kids in
worries.
TK times 19, but I would love to have that number.
Yep.
Ms. Huffman, do all schools, all elementary schools, do they use the SIPs? They all have them, but do they all use them?
No, ma'am. We have many schools that are using them, using SIPs, especially the 13 schools that are piloting iReady. You're going to see SIPs being used more heavily in those schools and also our schools that are the focal schools with our OASA department. They are also using SIPs because that's what the academic support providers are being trained in. We are getting more traction with schools sort of seeing the implementation and the data from other schools and wanting to attend more professional developments and reaching out, as Director Henry said, saying, can we get more support? Can we get the kids? More kids, can we get more materials? And so the traction is picking up as people are seeing the results of other schools.
Thank you so very much. Board, are there any other questions before we move on to school climate? No? Thank you, staff, for that presentation. We are ready to move on.
Now we have Director LaShante Smith. I had to make sure I introduced her. She's going to present on climate. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, board. I'm happy to stand here to present on school climate because we know that climate is important because our students are not able to reach academic outcomes if they do not feel safe at school, if they are not supported, and if their social and emotional needs are not met. So the first thing is we have to make sure our students are coming to school. And so this slide right here shows you our chronic absenteeism rates over the years. And as you can see, we are trending upward. We are at a rate at about 33% currently. And what's important to know about this slide is that our chronic absenteeism rate has increased. This is in line with what we're seeing in the county as well as the state. But it's also important to note that more students are now absent from school, but have reasons that are excused. So our students who are absent, the excused absence rate has gone up, but that still counts toward our chronic absenteeism rate. Next slide, please. So this shows our chronic and our severe absenteeism rate by subgroup. It's important to note that chronic is defined as students who miss between 10 and 19.99% of the school year to date. Students who are severely chronic are students who have missed more than 20% of the school year to this current date. So as you can see, our subgroup, when we think about race and ethnicities, who have the highest chronic and severe chronic absenteeism rate is our African-American student subgroup. I will talk later about some more things we're doing specifically for our African-American students. But right now, I just want to mention that we do notice this, and we have been serious about trying to reconnect and re-engage with our families who are missing school. And we've put in place several different initiatives, and we've partnered with several different organizations to support us in reaching our students who are not coming to school. The other important subgroup to know is that our students with IEPs have also a high chronic and severe absenteeism rate. Next slide. So this slide is a little difficult to read, but essentially what it's saying is that our state rate for chronic and severe absenteeism is around 32%. So the state rate is around, again, the same as what we're seeing in our district. Next slide. So the slide in front of you shows our suspensions to date. We do have those updated numbers as of March. So our updated numbers as of March, we have had 970 student suspensions. And what I want to know about this data is two things. One is that suspension is any time a student is removed from school for any portion of the day. We want to make sure that information is logged. In the past, we were not logging all of our suspensions. And then we passed in 2017 a positive school climate resolution geared at ending students being sent home without that suspension being logged. So we've really been very direct with our sites that every time a student is sent to the office, anytime a student misses class, or anytime a student is asked to go home, that should be logged as a suspension. But more importantly, we want to remember that anytime a student is suspended, the suspension is the consequence, but we want to ensure that students are not only receiving consequences, but are also receiving interventions, and those interventions should be targeted to support their behavior. And so that's something to note. I do want to celebrate though, this is just a slide and it kind of just shows suspensions year to year, but it's not really getting more into what we're seeing as far as the data. And so we have had a significant decrease in suspensions for weapons on our campus. For this school year, we have had over an 80% decrease of dangerous weapons found on our campus. That is an area of celebration. Another area of celebration is that our physical fights have decreased. I'm going to talk about that later in our spotlight, but we've been looking at the behavior, particularly around the use of force or violence on our campus and the actual act of fighting. And so I'll talk about that later, but we have seen a decrease in those two areas. These numbers have increased around the area of caused, attempted to cause, or threaten to cause physical injury. But if the board remembers, the California state passed basically law that we are not to suspend students for defiance or disruption. And so what we are seeing is that defiance and disruption have been upcoded to that cause, attempted to cause, or threaten to cause physical injury. And so we're really working with our sites on accurate coding, because that actually does not reflect what we're seeing on our campuses day to day. Next slide. So this slide right here shows our suspension rate. So as of March 2023, our district rate is 3.5%. What does that mean? 3.5% of our students have been suspended at least one time. The subgroup that is the most disproportionate in suspensions is our African American students. Their suspension rate, the rate of African American students, is 9.2%. Again, what does that mean? 9.2% of African American students have been suspended at least once. Why is this important to note? Is that means we are disproportionate in our suspensions for our African American and Black students. We are definitely taking a look at this and really trying to figure out what are the root causes of why students are being suspended. And from the work we've been doing through our climate teams and on campuses, what I can tell you is just qualitatively that it does start in the classroom with the relationships that our teachers are making with our Black students in particular. And we recently had a youth summit, and one of the questions we asked our students was around safety, was around suspensions, and around their perception. And I think to sum it up about what we need to do is, one student so eloquently stated that we need to listen. We need to listen to what our students are telling us each and every day, and we need to build authentic relationships with our students so that they feel supported on campus, so that they feel safe on campus, and so that they can go to a trusted adult on campus when there is a conflict. And we need to just normalize treating all of our students with respect, treating all of our students with dignity, and honoring when students do have social and emotional and mental health needs that need to be addressed. Instead of excluding them from school, we just have to continue to hone in on there are restorative interventions that can be done to keep students in school. Next slide. So some of our high leverage practices that we have been doing around school climate include ongoing professional development. So I was just talking about the importance of relationships, the importance of using positive behavior interventions and supports in the classroom, using those healing-centered practices and making sure that we're pairing students with interventions that are appropriate, that are timely, and that can really support behavior. So we have been doing monthly PD for school staff, as well as principals who have been attending. I have those numbers. Here we go. We've had 31 total PDs this year, and we've had approximately 1,300 attendees. Over 90% of attendees have stated that when they left the PD, they have learned something that they can take and use with them in the class the next day, which is really important. And so we just got to continue with the PD and with the professional development, and it can't be one-off. It just has to be something that's embedded in our system, and we all have to believe the same thing, and we have to believe that students deserve to be at school, and students deserve to have interventions and all of their social emotional needs met. We have also, as you all know, for 2 years now, starting at the end of last year, but really this is the first year of full implementation of our behavioral and mental health screener. We use that to screen students, to identify students who may be in need of mental health or behavioral health support before they actually demonstrate that need by acting out. And so our sites are using it. We use that data to make sure that we are linking students to services that will support their social, emotional, and behavioral health needs. Every month, we've been doing leadership development training. We're starting with our APs because our assistant principals, if you all didn't know, handle a lot of the discipline we see on campus. So every month, we do PLCs with our assistant principals, And we go through role plays and we do various exercises with them around coding so that we are ensuring that we are all aligned with our responses for our students. And then the last thing is we have tiered support. So we do have some central social workers who are going to school sites to provide direct supports to students who are not able to access that support on campus. And then we have direct support to school staff. So that's coaching in the classroom, going in, doing some consultation, looking at classroom practices, and then supporting teachers and building up their classroom practices to support students. Next slide. So related to attendance, some of the high leverage practices we've been doing. One is emphasizing conferences. So conferences have to happen before a student can formally go to a SARB hearing. The conferences have to start at the school site level. Unfortunately, we've had more difficulty this year in getting parents to that conference and getting school sites, helping school sites with getting parents to conferences who have to getting school sites to connect with parents who need to have the conferences for their students. So that's something we've been working on. I'm also happy to report that we have been able to fill a position. It's not a new position, but we've been able to fill a position for our coordinator of student recruitment and retention. And so that will definitely help us get up our conference rate and close our conferences, because again, we cannot SARB students until the conference is closed at the site, but we know sites are shorthanded and need a lot of support in order to reach out to parents and families to close those conferences. After the conferences, the next practice would be our SARB. So we do have a weekly SARB, and SARBs are done by school families and students. Once they had that conference at the school, they go to a SARB hearing, which is inclusive of district staff, county representatives, and different entities that come together to talk about a student's attendance. They put the student on a attendance improvement plan, address the barriers to attendance, and then that student is monitored until they reach a satisfactory level to where they can kind of come out of the SARB process. New is what we're doing right now is a re-engagement and connection campaign. So we're working with an organization called COPE. We've had them in the past, but we've streamlined their service to focus on the TK through 3 level. Why TK through 3? We're seeing that even at the preschool level in some of our state preschools, TK and kinder, we see a higher number of students not coming to school. So if we can start doing some early intervention and build good attendance habits, really support parents with understanding the importance of attending school every day, even missing 10 minutes of school can add up over a school year. We have to re-educate our families. We have to really get this out there so that we can have just a culture around attendance. And so COPE is currently working with several schools right now on this re-engagement and connection campaign. And at the end of the month, they're going to have a parent night where they're bringing all the parents together. Parents will be incentivized for attending and will be offered counseling, parent education, and other supports. And then we have tiered support. So some of our contracted providers are doing home visits to identified students who have not been coming to school to find out the root causes for why they are not attending, to hopefully address those barriers so that we can get our students back to school. And again, our partners are case managing some of the higher need families and students who have more barriers to get into school. I will tell you that from the home visits, we've seen a lot of things come up around students now being employed, getting jobs during the COVID time and now continuing to be employed and then just not able to attend schools. We've seen families have double jobs, right? So working double shifts and just they're not able to get their kids to school. So we're trying to work with these families and work with the students to find out like what alternatives we can put in place so that we can get our students in school. Is that, oh, next slide. not complete. There we go. So spotlight. So I do want to spotlight that we've had, like I said, a monthly professional learning community, a PLC, to support systemic use of the implementation of positive school climate practices. So we've had an average of 15 participants every month participate in this PLC to really talk about the role of the climate teams, what should we be doing on the climate team, what data we're collecting, and how you solution plan. So how you use the data, and shout out to EduClimber because we've been able to pull up data from EduClimber to show the team. But anyways, so using data to really come up with effective solutions and actionable solutions that we can implement on our campuses. Every month with the APs, we've been doing whole group training in Norman around our discipline matrix to make sure we are aligned across our system in our response to student behavior. And that has been very interesting because we've been norming around fights. So as I told you earlier, that code, that 500 code has increased, but many of those incidents should not have been logged under a fight. And so we're just working with school sites to accurately log incidents and do some norming around the things we're seeing on our campus in order to support our students. And we've been having some very deep discussion around discipline equity and what it means to actually be equitable and what that looks like in practice and not just on paper. And so again, we are disproportionate in our African-American student suspension. So when we discuss equity and when we talk about equitable discipline practices, we need to ensure that we are thinking about our most disproportionate ethnic group, which is our African-American students. And then our climate PLC will be presenting to central office staff to support planning for next school year. But I also want to take this time to highlight that we, as part of our climate and safety team with Mr. Booker, Julio Franco, and all of our CS4s, we do meet weekly and we talk about the climate teams on campus, talk about what is happening on each of our campuses so that we can ensure there's accurate support and that there's resources there. So I want to take the time to highlight and shout out Kennedy High School. Kennedy High School has had a stigma over the past of being a school that is not as safe and a school with a lot of issues going on. But I'm happy to report over the last 6 months, Kennedy High School has only had 2 fights. And that is something to really celebrate. And so let's give a hand for Kennedy High School. I want to shout out their administration who has been doing a really good job with their climate team. I want to shout out also their school safety team and their CS4 team who have really taken the time to better understand the needs of the students. And that's big for a comprehensive high school, especially an urban high school, to decrease their fights significantly. And students are in the classroom. So I don't know if you guys have had a chance to visit Kennedy recently, but if you go there, the halls have been clear, students are in the classroom and learning is taking place. And so I did want to just put that out there because that is an area of celebration. And while I'm on it, I'm also going to shout out Hercules High School, who the whole school year has, again, only had 2 fights for a whole school. So we can shout them out too. And why am I mentioning fights? It's just because that's one of the things we've been highlighting, and we want to make sure that students are safe on campus and that, you know, West Contra Costa or our schools are not seen as places where students are just, all these things are happening, right? So there's some good things happening in West Contra Costa. So I'm happy to report that. And I'm happy to report that our schools are actively meeting as climate teams and looking at their data and finding solutions to what we are seeing on campus. And I'm done talking. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Smith. Thank you, staff, for your presentation. I forgot to call public comment after the first part, the academic part. Please forgive me, community. Is there any public comment in-house on the first part or the second part with climate?
There's no public comment.
Any public comment on Zoom for the first part, academic, and the second part, climate? No?
No public comment.
Thank you so very much. We are going to ask questions. Again, let's start with 4 and then we'll rotate back around if we have more questions. I would be remiss if I did not also say that Kennedy had an amazing reclassification party. a couple of months ago. We were there, or a month or two ago. It was absolutely amazing. So I encourage all schools to do a reclassification celebration. It was absolutely amazing. Okay, board, anyone have 4 questions? Don't stack your questions. Y'all like to stack the questions. I've been counting. 4 questions, and then we'll go back around. Anyone have 4 questions? Trustee Reckler.
So thank you very much for the presentation, and I am celebrating the bright spots, so that's really great. Would you be able to discuss the significance of an excused absence?
Sure. The significance of an excused absence, anytime a student misses school, they are missing instruction, and so they are not receiving that instruction. And then once the student has reached an excessive number of excused absences, the student is still classified as chronically absent. And then even if they get to the level of severe, no matter if it is excused, they are still classified as a severely chronic student.
But parents, it must be parents or guardians are excusing, right?
Correct,
Yeah.
yeah. So we've also seen an increase of parents excusing students for illness, but in the past, pre-COVID, a cough or allergies or, runny nose, things like that, parents would still send their kids to school, and now they're keeping them home. And so that has definitely created an issue in our number of excused absences. But on another note, we've also seen the number of parents keeping their students home for like anxiety and mental health needs increase as well.
And then when you have these conferences and the SARBs, what are you finding? And what are some of the solutions that your team is coming up with?
Yeah, so the number one kind of finding at the SARB hearings have again been for difficulty in just getting the students to school. So like transportation issues, not necessarily not having a car, but parents not being able to get their student to school because of like working. So the parent works, so I can't get my kid to school on time. So then the student doesn't come at all. So we've been trying to mitigate with different solutions, such as giving bus passes out to students and families, trying to arrange for carpools, van pools. We also partnered with Ed Fund at one time that was giving gas cards out to help parents get gas so that they can have someone else take their children to school. But then again, what we're seeing for the upper grades, or should I say high school, secondary levels, it's just students not really feeling a connection to school, who want to come to school, and feeling like working is a way to make money right now and is a better outlet than coming to school. So just trying to navigate the fine details between the two. That's what we're seeing so far. The main reasons is work and then transportation.
Okay, hold on, that's 4. We stacked them, that's 4. Hold on, I'm gonna come back to you though. Hold one second. Ms. Smith, I do have 2 questions, and then we'll go back and see if Trustee Reckler has more questions. Ms. Smith, can you talk to us about our LGBTQI community? Are we looking intentionally at their experience at our schools and how it impacts fights, absenteeism, suspension? Are they a data point that we're looking at? Because again, we're talking about school climate and culture and how one feels when they go to school. Do we have any data around our LGBTQI community, IA community?
Yes, we do. It's not shared here, but I can actually get it to you because we disaggregate it. We did a student resource survey about 2.5 months ago now that our student trustees originally created. And one of the questions that was added was around sexual orientation so that we could disaggregate the data by our LGBTQ plus students. And I can tell you from our preliminary data that our LGBTQ plus students do not feel as safe at school as our other subgroups. So that was very apparent even from the small sample size that we had. And so last month on our smoke day, we, for the first time ever, did a safe space training, and it was creating safe spaces for LGBTQ plus students. And we had over 300 attendees and several hundreds of messages around, thank you for bringing this. This is the first time we've had a training like this, and they want more of it. So we are disaggregating our data. Unfortunately, data in the past has not been disaggregated in that way. So we're trying to do that now by making sure that every survey we give asks the question around sexual orientation so that we are able to disaggregate the data to see other supports that we need to be put in place. Also, our coordinator of PBIS is working with a partner, I don't want to mess up the name, to bring training, and it's actually free training to all of our school sites. And again, creating safe spaces for LGBTQ plus students.
Thank you so much. The last question I have is, you were talking about our assistant principals hold the burden of discipline. So are we seeing a movement away from our counselors having part of that? Because, for a long time, the counselors would shoulder that, especially like in middle school, right?
Yes.
They would shoulder the discipline. So are we seeing a trend where we're moving away from counselors doing discipline and towards the APs or the VPs doing discipline?
Absolutely. We changed, the counseling job description was changed, I think, last school year, to move away from discipline. And so again, that's a mindset shift, because if you've been here a long time, when I first came and I saw middle school counselors doing discipline, I was kind of confused. However, that's changed. So counselors should not be doing discipline. They should be doing advisory, mentoring, and counselors are actually able to do small group interventions in schools. So yes, counselors are not responsible for any discipline on our campuses. And so because that's a shift, it has been interesting to see how it's playing out, but we're getting everyone on board that counselors should be counselors.
Thank you so very much. I'm complete. Trustee Reckler, do you have more? Anyone else? Trustee Phillips, did you have anything?
Just comments.
Just comments. Trustee, one second. Trustee Christian, do you have anything? No? Trustee Santos, questions? Okay. Trustee Reckler, you're back in.
So we're not alone. This is a statewide issue. Our data mirrors the state. Has the state given any guidance, help, support, ideas? We are not an island in this.
Well, we have like a coordinating council that we meet every month and talk about the issue and talk about what different school districts are doing. So we've been able to report out like partnerships, doing parent education, home visits. Speaking of that, we are going to revisit our home visit protocol, because in the past, our district conducted home visits. We stopped that practice during COVID, and we have not revisited that practice since then. So we need to look at that, because again, if students aren't coming to school, it's difficult to assume that they then come to a conference if they're not coming to school. So we have to get a way that we are going to them. And so we've had various ideas, such as like community hubs and going into the community and going into the areas, the concentrated areas where students are not coming, and just doing some more outreach there. But as far as the state, it's more around what is everyone else doing, knowing that it's an issue, and then just sending out information to families, again, about the importance of every school day. Every day counts, but even every minute counts. So just trying to overly educate parents. We've been looking at another way to do nudges for families. And so what that would look like is that instead of just the standard letter that families are getting around, hey, you've reached this amount of absences, how do we send nudges by text message? hey, your student is not in school. What does this mean? They've missed, 2 days of school. This can add up to this. How can we support you? And then kind of get the support that way. And then also supporting schools and building out those tier 1 incentives. So when families do bring their kids to school and we do have students who are attending, how are we incentivizing them for that behavior so that we're reinforcing it? Because we have heard from families that they do like to be celebrated, right? And so even if families they don't have that perfect attendance, if they're improving their attendance by even a little bit, that should be celebrated. So we're trying to work on ways to improve our incentive programs and our reinforcement systems around attendance.
Okay, thank you. I have some comments at the end.
Thank you so much. Board, any more questions? No? Okay, we're gonna go to comments. We're gonna do comments. Keep it, short. Because we're moving a little close to time, but I don't want to put a clock on you, but just keep it cute, keep it short. All right. Who wants to go first? We don't have to use the timer. I'll give them that look like, all right, the whole church finger, wrap it up. All right, let's go. Who wants to go first? Comments? Okay, Trustee Phillips, you're up.
Can we have the timer?
You want the timer?
I do.
Sure. Okay. Can we get the timer? 1.5 minutes. Great. Go ahead, Trustee Phillips. Let's start it over.
It's a minute and a half.
Yep.
So I'm gonna just say very briefly, well, two things. One, as we move through these items, if we limit the questions some, then we can let people say their comments, right? But one of the things that I want to start by saying is this, and I'm not speaking or trying to speak for all of the African-American parents, but I can say this from my own experience that despite having some great teachers, and my kids have had some great teachers, their school environment is often very stressful, has been very stressful for them. And since they've started in the district, I personally have given them mental health days where I have just let them stay home because they have been stressed the hell out at their schools because of the environment. I have done that repeatedly. And I know that if I'm doing it on the board, other Black parents are doing the same thing as well. And I get the idea of celebrating the kids, but the truth of the matter is, if they feel comfortable, they will be asking to be at school, begging to be at school because they like to be there. They are stressed out and their parents are just letting them stay home. And that's not going to change until we change.
Thank you. Trustee Reckler, you have comments?
I
Whoa, whoa,
do.
whoa, whoa, wait for the timer. Hold on. All right. Hit it.
I do. So the first thing that comes to mind is the school climate and the discussions around attendance, which this is a hair on fire emergency. We are not alone. It's across the state, but the data proves quite succinctly that if you don't show up, you're going to do worse. And it's actually statistically correlated with lots of things like not graduating, not learning to read, not learning basic numeracy. So it's very, very serious. So we need all the help we can get. I mean, of course, I'd like the outreach to be positive and personal and about relationships, but it also is true that when people show up, the climate does need to be something that makes people feel welcome and not stressed and engaged. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done there for sure. For the Friday memo, I would like to see a rubric on sites and on grades that have the biggest challenges So I'd like to get that dug into a little bit more. And also on one of the slides that you had on suspensions, I would also like to see that rubriced out. Previous years, the graph was good, but I really couldn't quite get the graph so great. So just to block it out in numbers so that we can really see what's going on, trend a little bit clearer. And I can send in some notes on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else have any comments? No? Okay. I don't think that we got limited questions. We kind of went around a couple of times until hopefully everybody got their question answered who wanted to get their questions out there. If not, please let me know. I would be more than happy to go back and we can ask more questions. We have the time, and if not, we can extend the meeting. I want to thank staff for your presentation. Thank you so very much. It is much appreciated. Dr. Hurst, I think one of the things that we heard tonight and one of the things that we continue to talk about is transportation. Transportation is impactful. It impacts our absenteeism. It impacts our, well, mostly our absenteeism, but also that then turn around and impacts our academics. So I think that we do need to have at some point a conversation, a real in-depth conversation about transportation in the district at every level. And we heard some good strategies tonight about bus passes and other things, but looking at our communities in small snippets and see where is the transportation the reason why we have the chronic absenteeism. And if so, what can we as a district do with our moonshot thinking? Ms. Smith, thank you so much for, and Ms. Huffman, thank you so much for you guys taking a real look at all of our subgroups, because everybody's experience in school counts. Everyone's experience in school counts, and everyone's experience in school should be a positive one. And we know that it's not all the time. So thank you very much. We are complete and board. We're moving on to E2. E2 is budget update since the second interim. Dr. McIntyre, this is your item. But Dr. McIntyre, give me 1 second. Do you have a time, Dr. McIntyre? Do you know how long this is going to take?
About 10 minutes.
About 10 minutes. Okay, great. Because I'm just making sure that we have enough time to finish the agenda. Dr. McIntyre, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. It's an honor to be here again. This is maybe a little less cheerful an item than the last item, but we're bringing back kind of an update on our financial position after the publication of second interim, which we shared at the March 15th board meeting, mainly because there were a couple of items for staffing reductions on that meeting that were not approved. And so we needed to come back and make some adjustments. And show we were asked to come back and show the impact of what those adjustments are. And we were also able, while second interim only goes with actuals through January 31st, we were able to actually provide you more current data through the end of February in this report. And so the goal here tonight is to show the board, kind of where we are, because we know we're on the edge of a very difficult place, and that's garnering us some attention from the County Office of Education. So the goal is really just to give you an updated position. So that way, as we're looking at different items moving forward, you'll have that lens with which to make decisions collectively as a governance team. So with that in mind, we wanted to start by showing you the shifts in the general fund. It says second interim in the third column, but this is really through the end of February, projected forward through the end of the year. We see that the revenue changes from first interim through the end of February. We see that federal revenues are projected to decline a little bit in the general fund. We see a small change in LCFF revenue due to updating of our ADA. And then we saw the state revenue because of those state grants that came in after first interim report, really driving up the revenue. And so that was the big change we saw between first and second interim. And of course, that's still there. So we're not reducing that. And so recognizing that big shift. Also, the other local revenue is coming in higher than we originally projected, substantially higher, nearly $5 million. So what we've seen between the first interim and now is an increase in total revenues for the general fund, the total general fund, both restricted and unrestricted, of $56.2 million. Great news. Great news. Now we will talk about how and where those different sources of money came in, because the vast majority of those the additional revenue came in on the restricted side of the budget, which means strings attached. We can't just do anything we want as an organization. Now, on the expense side of the house, part of what we've been dealing with is coming to a conclusion or drawing to a conclusion with all of our labor negotiations. And so we're moving a lot of dollars that we had expenses that we had reserved in the fund balance up into the expense categories to show the board what the impact of that is for not only this year, but for next year with all the Me Too's that were approved earlier this evening. So with that, when we look on the expense side of the budget, we see certificated salaries are $6.3 million above what was originally projected. We have a significant amount of movement on the classified side between unrestricted and restricted side of the budget. So while we saw increases on the unrestricted side of the budget, we have the ability, due to funding allowability, to move some of those expenditures into the restricted side of the budget. And we're taking advantage of that in the current plan. Of course, when we spend more on labor, we have more on benefits. Another area that we saw a fairly big shift, and some of these are dollar for dollar shifts, where we saw a reduction in many of the programs hold until they identify what their expenditures are going to be, whether they're going to be materials and supplies or contracts. They hold funds in their books and supplies account. And then when they reallocate, because they actually are ready to spend those dollars, in this case, you can see a significant amount that was being held in the books and supplies account ended up being spent in the all other operating services expense account. And a large portion of that has to do with the fact that we're still struggling as an organization to fill all of our positions with internal staff. And that's causing us to contract out to fill those positions, mostly on the restricted side of the budget with IEPs. And so we're seeing kind of some placeholder dollars within different budget placements around the organization being shifted over in that regard, but still a net between those two, of over $5 million outgoing or increase in expenses. Capital outlay and other outgoes are minor shifts. So what we see is that while revenue is up substantially, income or expenses were also rise by nearly $15 million. And so when we look at this, on the total, the year looks amazing because we see this $41.2 million surplus. Not quite as much as what we had planned when we looked at the regular at second interim originally, but still good news for this year specifically. So when we look at the components of those increasing ending fund balances, as we said, we were seeing those fund balances go from 46 million up to 100 million as a result of the changes. But 29 million of that is on the unrestricted side, and 70 million of that is on the restricted side of the budget. And so on the unrestricted side, you see, we have to meet that. We have to have money in the bank for our stores, our non-spendables, and we have to set aside our reserve for economic uncertainty. So that really only leaves $14.2 million of unassigned, unrestricted general fund dollars that's really available for any discretionary use. And we want to have some of that money set aside because we know we're deficit spending in future years. And so that's why we're not making an effort to burn through that or allocate all of that this year, because we do need it in future years. On the restricted side of the budget, we see that vast increase that we were talking about, the arts, music, and instructional materials block grant. Note that this number is roughly half of what we originally saw. The state has clawed back half of this. So that not the greatest news there. The Learning Recovery Emergency Block Grant and the other restricted balances you see there. So that brings the restricted fund balance to $70.7 million. And for this year, we have no requirement or need to touch Fund 17, which is that fund where the board had set aside money for economic calamity. And so in this year, we don't have a mathematical need to allocate any of those funds. One of the things that we do try to do is look in detail on each side of the budget where the changes come from. And so here you see, very detailed numbers of all of the kind of changes to revenue since the first interim report, because we show you very high level detail. And so we do want to show you the backup behind that, what's behind each of these. And so you can see some of the figures in and out that bring us to those total shifts, both on the unrestricted and restricted side of the budget. Similarly, on the expenditure side,
just recognizing some of the shifts and costs as a result of some of the shifts, both on the restricted and unrestricted side of the budget. You can see, for example, on the all other operating expenses on the unrestricted outside contracts in the unrestricted side of the budget, that increased 2 million. And then on the restricted side, it's 13.8 million. So those two together were that $15 million that you were seeing on that summary page, but here we've got it separated out between which sides of the budget they're on. So you can see most of the change is on the restricted side of the budget, both with the books and supplies and the all other operating expenditures. And that's going back to what I was talking about our struggle to find those to internally staff some of these positions, or many positions. So now that we've talked about the implications or impact to the current year, we also have to talk about the impact of the MYP, the multi-year projections, because as a governance team, we've got to, and as a district, we have to make it or clear all the oversight requirements with the County Office of Education. And so recognizing that we can't have a genuine conversation about multi-year projections unless we acknowledge what the assumptions are. And so here you see some of the assumptions that we're using for the out years. So, we're seeing small declines in enrollment, not quite the same level that we saw during COVID, but we're still projecting some declining. When we look at our trended cohort survival model, that seems to be the best fit of the three typical models for enrollment projections. There's just regular cohort survival. How many kids were in kindergarten? We expect them all to go to first grade. We know that's not reality. So we use a trended model where we look at what the normal survival rate is. If 88% of the class goes from kindergarten to first grade the next year, then we can use those trends to project forward, including birth rates. So we get a lot better data that way. So we're using that that allows us to produce the ADA. One of the things that changed in the last year that we've been talking about is the fact that the ADA percentage statewide has dropped tremendously. We're not getting the students in their seat as an industry as much as we did in prior years. This is not only a WCC USD problem, but it's a statewide problem that is also impacting WCC USD and our students, and probably very much an important component of what we're struggling with to move student achievement as well. We're seeing the UPP information there, the trend over time. We're seeing the projected COLAs, recognizing there was an augmentation or a state additional augmentation to the COLA in the current year. But I do want to point out, we are using the entire 8.13% that the Department of Finance said to use in our calculations for next year. But since the DOF has told us to do that in January, state revenues are $4 billion behind forecast. And so that in itself is not a big enough number to say the sky's falling. It's not, but we need to keep an eye on those state revenues and to see if it's realistic that the full COLA will be funded next year as we move toward the May revise and toward June, because Proposition 98 has enough one-time items in it to absorb $4 billion. But if we fall behind 10, 12, $15 billion, then it may not. And then we get into that scenario we were talking about in late November, December, and early January, where the Legislative Analyst Office said they thought statutory COLA was going to be in higher, but they thought the state wouldn't be able to fund all of it. Now, keep in mind, because we're using this higher COLA number in our out year revenue projections, if it is actually funded at a lower number, then we've got a problem that's getting worse and worse without us causing it, so to speak. So I do want to point that out as a risk in our model, and I'll show you exactly where to look for that in the line items. Separately, we're using the STRS and PERS rates. We learned today that the PERS rate for next year is going to be about 0.3% lower. So that's great news. And hopefully we'll get revised STRS rates soon, but I don't expect those really to change. And then you've got step and column. So here I'm showing you the multi-year projections for the unrestricted general fund. The reason I'm starting here is this is one of the areas and when the county sent us our lack of going concern letter, they said, when you submit next year's adopted budget, the 23-24 projection for the unrestricted general fund has to be operationally neutral or better. So what that means is if you come down here to line C in the center column for 23-24, where it says minus $10 million, we have to make enough changes to the budget to bring that number to zero or to be a positive number. Doesn't have to be a massively positive number, but they will not approve our budget if there's a negative number there. And so that is one thing we need to deal with that I'm showing you here. The other thing I wanted to show you up at the top where it says LCFF resources for 23-24, that $343 million assumes we are fully funded on that 8.13% COLA. So in the event that state revenues continue to drop and the state is not able to fund the full COLA, or the actual statutory COLA comes in lower, the last two measures drive the number down, then we will see reduced revenue. And so it will make the amount of cuts we need to achieve even deeper. And so I just want to make sure that we're sharing that, because that is a big governance requirement that's standing like 2 feet in front of us right now. You can see when you look forward and you project all the same known information using the Department of Finance numbers, we see by the time we get to 24-25 that we would need to use $19.8 million of Fund 17 or make the appropriate cuts. And so, for example, here, if we made the $10 million worth of cuts to next year, we would need to make an additional $8 million worth of cuts in 24-25 to stay operationally neutral. That would be the ideal pathway forward financially. I'm not saying programmatically, but financially, that would be the ideal path forward. And very likely what the county would like to see us do. Looking at the combined general fund, what you're seeing here is operationally, it looks worse. And there's a very good reason why it looks worse operationally. The reason it looks worse is we received a lot of revenue this year that we will be spending in future years. So we know on the restricted side of the budget, we're going to be deficit spending.
Dr. McIntyre, excuse me, it's 9:45. I have to extend the meeting. If I don't, something happens. I don't know. So board, I would like to extend the meeting until 10:30 and we should be finished by 10:30. Can I, listen, if you think that we don't have to extend it because we're already finishing at 10:30, it is what it is. Tammy is somewhere telling me that I have to do this, I'm sure. Okay, so I would like to extend the meeting till 10:30. May I get a motion to extend the meeting to 10:30? Great, I move that we extend the meeting to 10:30. Can I get a second?
I second.
Great, thank you. All right, so board, let's take a vote to extend the meeting until 10:30. Trustee Santos?
Yes.
Great. Trustee Phillips?
Abstain.
Thank you. Trustee Reckler?
Reckler, no.
Thank you. We end at 10:30 anyway. Trustee Christian?
Yes.
Thank you. Trustee Smith Folds, yes. Now that's 2, 1 abstain, 1 no, and 2 yeses. What does that mean? It doesn't pass? So don't we go to 10:30 anyway? You speaking so softly, sir. Do we go to 10:30 anyway? Okay, so we just gonna keep on moving, and then it only takes 3 of us to stay here. So let's just keep on pushing. Dr. McIntyre, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm on my last slide. So I just wanted to point out that we're showing a massive deficit spending next year and in the out year, because we're taking revenues that we got this year that have 4- and 5-year lifespans, and we're spreading those expenses out across those in the future years. That doesn't totally solve our problem, which is why in the last slide, I spent a lot of time talking about the fact that despite the fact we have these restricted dollars, despite our current plan to use every allowable transfer from the unrestricted general fund into these other funding sources to maintain longer term solvency, we still have work to do. The county has given us direction and set expectations around that. And so hopefully there's a clear understanding, despite the fact that I just showed you a bunch of numbers on charts. That's not very pretty. I'm sorry for that. But I do hope it provides some clarity.
Thank you, Dr. McIntyre. Board, let's keep it to 3 questions for the first round, and let's see where we are with time. Anyone have 3 questions? Let me call for public comment. Is there any public comment on E2 budget update since the second interim? Any in-house public comment?
There's no public comment.
Any Zoom public comment?
No public comment.
Perfect. Okay, board, anybody have 3 questions for the first round? No? Trustee Phillips, go ahead.
Dr. McIntyre. What is, please define the term survival rate.
I'm sorry, survival rate?
Believe that's a term you used in your presentation. I'm not sure that's a term you used in your presentation.
Do you remember the rest of the sentence? I don't doubt your correctness. Oh, cohort survival. Okay, so when we talk about we've talked several times as an organization, and even here at board meetings, about the fact that we as a district have declining enrollment. And so one of the things that we do to estimate our enrollment for future years is we look at every single grade level at every single school site. So we do this on school site by school site basis. So pick, elementary school X and say in first grade this year, well, let's say 5 years ago in first grade, the cohort that went from first grade to second grade the next year, 88% of those students transferred from that year to the next. And then the next year, 101%. And so forth. So we look at those trends over time and we say, most recently, over the last 3 to 5 years, what have those percentage trends looked like? And so we can take our current enrollment and project those forward over multiple years in order to make an enrollment estimate. And then we use that ADA calculation to estimate our ADA from that.
Do you know who came up with the term survival rate?
Cohort survival?
Particularly the survival part.
I don't. I know it's a term. It's one of the 4 models that's commonly used in enrollment projections. I don't know where the name for that particular model came from. The other models being just regular cohort survival, trended cohort survival, and regression, which is a best fit line over time.
Do you think that the word survival is actually a good description of what's happening with these kids?
In this case, I've used a term that's probably better used among CBOs to talk about the projection of enrollment. I certainly wasn't intending to be callous or imply that there's any lack of safety as a result of doing enrollment projections.
I am glad that you used the term that's really used. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Trustee Phillips. Anyone else? 3 questions for the first round? Okay, Dr. McIntyre, I do have a couple of questions. 14.2 million unassigned, is that one-time funds?
Which 14.2 million are you talking about?
There was, so $56.2 million in revenue. And then of that, you said 14.2 is unrestricted or is not assigned, right? We haven't assigned that money yet.
Correct. In 22-23.
So we get it in 22-23. We have 14.2 million that we have not assigned.
We have not committed.
We're not committed.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
The county is telling us that, y'all got to show me 10. Correct? Right now, show me 10.
Correct.
You just told me that we have, listen, board, I'm taking presidential privilege. This is a little bit more than 3 questions. You just told us that we have 14.2, right? So can't we say, yo, county, we got the 10 because we got 14.2 right here. Is that or is that not possible to do?
What the reason the county is asking us to preserve the fund balance in the unrestricted general fund side of the budget is because in order to stretch out our cash, we are moving a lot of expenses that belong in the unrestricted side of the budget into restricted funding sources. When those funding sources are exhausted, those expenses come rolling back. And so what the county is trying to do is help us make choices that will eventually work us toward aligning our operations to match our revenues. Because what they see is as those funding sources, remember, some of those funding sources are 2 years, 3 years. We have one of them that's 5 years. As those funding sources are exhausted, like we're on next year is the last year of the ESSER 3 money. We have $8 million worth of staffing sitting in that funding source, and it ends, that $8 million is going to come washing back to the unrestricted side of the budget in 24-25. So this is part of why we have that fiscal solvency plan where we not only need to make cuts, but we need to take advantage of these one-time funding sources, which, to be honest, if you look at it's totally legal and allowable, but there are, other desirable uses for those one-time funding sources that we're not going to necessarily be able to pursue
because we have to stretch out our solvency as we're doing.
So what I heard you say is that we have 14.2, but the county doesn't want us to touch that 14.2 because in the out years that are coming up, there's money that's gonna have to roll back into the unrestricted fund, and the county saying y'all can go ahead and cover that with the 14.2, and we still need you guys to show us 10. Is that accurate?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, that's what they want. Is that what they have to have? Can we make our decision and say, we hear what you're saying, but we want to take the 14.2 and we want to say, we are going to take 10 and we're going to leave 4.2 over here in this bucket. So when stuff rolls back, we'll have 4.2 to deal with that. And then we'll figure out where we get the other money from. Are they able to? Y'all make the worst students. Y'all just talk to the side. I mean, goodness gracious. Let me just y'all got y'all I'm getting confused over here with the chatter. Dr. McIntyre, is that true or not? Can we do that or no?
So I'm obviously without our fiscal advisor kind of interjecting at this point, and I don't see our fiscal advisor in the attendee list. But so what I would have to reference back is to our most recent written correspondence from the county, which is the most recent lack of going concern letter we've received that lays out these criteria in order for them to approve our adopted budget. So I would say if we make another choice that falls short, any combination of choices that fall short of the direction of balancing on the unrestricted side of the budget, we run, they told us we're going to run afoul and they're not going to approve our adopted budget. That just initiates a whole nother series of intervention where it gets progressively worse and worse, and the board progressively loses control of the district.
Thank you so much. Okay, board, anybody else have more than 3 or have additional questions? 3 more questions, less than 3 questions, more than 3 questions? Anyone? No? Fantastic. Okay, so any comments from the board? I did call for public comment, did I? I did. I remember that. All right, any board comments? Go ahead, sir. Oh, put your little clock up there, please. 1:30. 1:30. Say it again. Oh, we are on item 2 and I called for public comment, but now I'm going to call for a board comment and then we'll move to item 3. Okay, board comment. We're waiting for the clock to come up, 1:30.
I want to say thank you.
Hold on, sir. Hold on. That
I'm
clock.
sorry.
There you go. All right,
Excuse
hit
me.
it. There you go.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I want to say thank you to Dr. McIntyre for his presentation. I think when we're talking about money, particularly other people's money, you need to be blunt and frank. And you were in good form tonight, sir. So thank you very much for that. I think the writing on the wall is clear. I think we are going to run into that wall. Hopefully, collectively as a governance team, we hit the brakes before that happens. But right now, it looks like we're going full steam ahead. And it's going to be a glorious crash. And that's going to be very unfortunate for the kids and frankly, the staff in this district. I do want to say also in your frankness tonight, I'm very glad that you used the technical term that you all use when you're not here in this space. And I think survival is actually a very appropriate term because that's what we have. We have a bunch of kids and families who are surviving one year to the next, to the next, to the next. And I think there's a reason that the term's used. I think it is apropos. And until we create a space where kids are living, thriving, not just surviving, we'll keep having this problem.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Comments? No? Great. All right, here we go. We are at E3, Board Policy 3320, Claims and Actions Against the District. Who has this?
Point of order.
Yes.
The meeting ends in 2 minutes. Should we not table this to the next meeting?
Well, you know, Trustee Reckler? I would like us to continue on because this is the last one, but that is at the pleasure of the people who would like to stay, I suppose. Dr. Hurst, do you have any comment to that? Do we have to table because it ends at 10 o'clock, or I thought we ended at 10:30, but go ahead. We have to table it? Okay, so we have to table board policy 3320. Who we looking at?
In 2 minutes, can we address the questions on the legal bills or urban intellectuals AMOs? These were the pulled from the consent.
Oh, yeah, we do have a consent item pulled. It was consent item C6. Board, we want to hear that consent item? Can we get another motion to stay for our consent item? I didn't pull it, but can we get another motion to stay for the consent item? No, we running out of time. Motion to stay to hear E3 and the consent item C6 or no? No, okay. So there is no motion. So Dr. McIntyre, do with that what you will. We are now 10 o'clock. So we are tabling BP 3320, claims and actions against the district. We are also, Dr. Hurst, I'm assuming C6 has to come back to the board for the next board meeting. The next regular board meeting is April 26, 2023 at Dejan Middle School. Thank you, everyone, for a electrifying meeting. I appreciate it. I thank staff, you did very well. Thank you, board trustees. And this meeting is adjourned at 10 o'clock. Good night, everyone.